The cake sat on a folding table at the front of the parish hall, under a paper cloth the color of butter, 80 candles, none of them lit yet. My mother's name across the top in blue icing, Rosemary. The letters ran downhill at the end because whoever piped it had run out of room. I had been standing near the coffee urn for about 20 minutes when my brother stood up and tapped his fork against his glass. Grady is good at rooms. He has always been good at rooms. He waited until the last two conversations died out, and then he started talking about our mother the way you talk about somebody who is sitting right there and can hear every word, which is to say warmly and a little louder than he needed to. Then he got to the part about the last 11 years. He said somebody had to step up when Mom had her stroke. He said it had not been easy. He counted it out for everybody on his fingers, the way he counts things out for clients, the mortgage, the pills, the property taxes. He said 11 years is a long time to carry something and never once complain about it. 60 people nodded. A few of them said amen because it was a church hall, and that is what people say in a church hall. And then he looked over at me. He did not sneer. I want to be clear about that, because it matters later. He looked at me the way you look at a dog that got into the trash and doesn't know any better. He said every family has one. He said ours was standing right over there by the coffee, and that we loved her anyway. He said the words, the family charity case, and he said them gently, and half the room laughed. My mother laughed too. She had her hand on his arm while she did it. I did not say anything. I want to be clear about that as well. I did not raise my voice one time that night, and I have not raised it one time since. I set my cup down on the table by the napkins. I walked out the side door into the parking lot. I sat in my car for about as long as it takes to count to 40. Then I reached under my coat on the passenger seat and got out the folder. It was a blue folder, the cheap kind, $1.29 at the drugstore on Frederica Street, 323 pages inside it, sorted by year with a summary on top that I had written out by hand, because I do not own a color printer. I walked back inside, down between the 2 rows of tables, past my aunt, past my cousin Bernie, past the sheet pans and the folding chairs and the good chair they had carried in from the rectory for my mother to sit in. I set the folder down on the paper cloth right next to the cake, right beside the box of matches. I did not open it. I said one sentence to my brother. It was 7 words long. Then I went back out the side door and let it swing shut behind me, and it is a heavy door. So it took its time. Here is the part I did not know yet that folder only answered the first question. That night I understood one thing about my family. 1. The second thing took me 7 more weeks, and a woman in her 80s who has never in her life thrown away a piece of paper. The third thing took 5 months, and it did not come from my brother at all. It came out of a cedar chest that had been sitting at the foot of a bed in that house since before I was born. I am 39 years old. I work 3rd shift at a cooperative outside Owensboro, Kentucky, measuring the moisture in white oak staves that will end up as bourbon barrels. I have been the one my family worries about for 16 years. By the end of that fall, every single person in that hall knew which one of us had actually been paying. Let me back all the way up, because none of that makes sense unless you know what my Tuesdays look like. I clock in at 10:40 at night. The cooperative sits off a 2-lane road east of Owensboro, and from the parking lot at night it looks like a lit-up ship somebody parked in a soybean field. Inside, it smells like scorched oak and steam and machine oil. It is loud in a way that stops being loud after about a year. After that, it is just the sound the world makes. My job is moisture. Every stave that comes out of the kilns has to sit in a range, and if it sits outside that range, the barrel will leak 8 months from now in a rick house in Nelson County, and nobody will ever know it was mine. So I pull staves off the line and I put the meter on them and I write the number down. Then I write down which kiln, which cart, which hour. Then I sign it. That is the whole job. Measure it. Write it down. Sign your name to it. I have done that for 14 years. I get off at 7 in the morning. I drive home with the sun coming up over the Ohio River Bridge, and I eat something standing at the counter, and I sleep from about 8 until 2:30 in the afternoon in a bedroom with a blackout curtain thumbtacked over the window because I never got around to buying a real one. Home is half of a duplex on Triplet Street. I rent it. There is a maple in the front yard that drops something on my car in every season, and a landlord named Denny who fixes things in his own time, and a neighbor on the other side of the wall who watches game shows with the volume all the way up. It is fine. It has always been fine. I drive a Ford Escape from 2011 with 281,000 miles on it. I have replaced the transmission once, in a friend's garage, over 2 weekends, with a manual open on a milk crate. I was married for 5 years. His name was Cody, and he was not a bad man. He was just tired of a wife who worked nights and sent money somewhere every month. And in 2016, he stopped being tired of it out loud and started being tired of it quietly. And then he left. We split the debt, and neither one of us fought about anything. We do not have children. I want to say that plainly here so nobody is waiting for a kid to show up in this story. There is no kid. Now here is the thing about me that my family has been laughing at since 2010. I write everything down. There is a spiral notebook in the glove box of the Escape with the date and the odometer for every trip I have taken since October of that year. Not just work miles, all of them. There is a 2-drawer file cabinet in my hallway that I bought at the Goodwill on Parish for $6. And inside it, every bank statement I have received in 16 years is clipped by month with a binder clip and filed by year. Every canceled check, every receipt over $10. Every text message that has anything to do with money gets screenshotted and printed at the library on Frederica for 10 cents a page. My aunt calls it my little hobby. My brother used to call it my paperwork thing. At Christmas one year, my cousin gave me a label maker as a joke, and everybody thought that was very funny. And honestly, it was a good gift. I still use it. Nobody in my family has ever once asked me why I started. There is a reason. It happened in October of 2010, 18 months after my father died, and I am going to tell you about it. But not yet, because for 16 years I did not have a single scrap of paper that could prove my side of it. And the whole point of this story is what happens when that finally changes. My father was Vernon Bickett. He worked 31 years at a mill an hour from where I work now, and he died on the 14th of March, 2009, at 63, in the parking lot at the end of a shift. Heart. He was reaching for the door handle of his truck. A man named Odell found him. My mother is Rosemary. She was a checker at the IGA for 22 years, and she can still add a column of numbers in her head faster than I can. My brother is Grady. He is 6 years older than me. He sells commercial real estate, and he is genuinely good at it. And in the family we are, and I want you to hear how neat this is. We are exactly 2 kinds of people. Grady is the one who made something of himself. I am the one we worry about. Nobody decided that at a meeting. It just settled over the house sometime around the year I turned 12, and it never lifted again. When Grady was between jobs in 2005, he was finding his footing. When I picked up an extra shift, I was struggling. When he moved back home for a year, he was helping his mother. When I lived at home for 4 months after my divorce, everybody got very quiet and very kind about it. That is the part people who did not grow up in a house like that never quite believe. You do not get told you are the lesser one. You get treated like it so consistently, for so long, by so many people at once. that eventually you would feel dramatic saying it out loud. So you don't say it out loud. You just start writing things down. On a Tuesday in the first week of March, my phone went off at 3 in the afternoon, which is the middle of my night. I let it buzz twice before I reached for it. It was Grady. He wanted to talk about our mother's 80th birthday. He talked for 11 minutes. I know because the call log said 11 minutes and I looked at it afterward. The way I look at everything. He had booked the parish hall at St. Mary of the Woods out in Whitesville for the second Saturday in April. He had a caterer lined up for the meat and the rest was going to be covered dishes. He said Mom did not want a fuss, and then he described a fuss for about 4 minutes. He said 60 people, give or take. He said he was handling it. Then he said, and you just come, and I will take care of everything else. I said that sounded good. I said I would be there. I hung up and lay in the dark with my arm over my eyes and did not go back to sleep. To explain why that sentence landed the way it did, I have to take you back 11 years, March of 2015. My mother came out of the IGA on a Thursday morning with 2 bags in her left hand and got about 9 steps from the door before her right leg quit on her. A man loading groceries into a minivan caught her under the arms. She was 68. It was a small stroke. As those things go, she kept her speech. She kept most of the right side. Eventually, after a lot of work she hated doing. What she lost was the ability to live in that house the way she had been living in it. She could not do stairs fast, could not drive after dark, and could not stand at a stove for 40 minutes. I remember the hospital hallway better than I remember the room. Grady got there before I did because I was coming off shift and I had to go home and change. And by the time I walked in, he already had a folder open on the little rolling table. He is like that. It is not a bad quality. In a crisis, my brother produces paperwork. He had durable power of attorney forms. He had already talked to somebody at his office who knew somebody. He said, "Whit, let me take the paperwork side. You take everything else." And he slid a page around and put his finger on a line. I signed where he pointed. I was 38 hours awake. I want to be fair to myself here and also honest. I did not read it. I read maybe the top third of it. I trusted him. And more than that, I was relieved. Somebody was handling the part I did not know how to handle. Here is what we worked out over the next few weeks. At that same rolling table and then at her kitchen counter, Mom would stay in the house on Hayden Bridge Road. That was the whole point. She had lived there since 1974, and my father had put the back porch on it himself, and she was not going anywhere else. There was still a mortgage on it because they had refinanced twice, once for his medical bills and once for reasons nobody ever explained to me. The payment was $410 a month. Her prescriptions ran about $140. The county property taxes came due twice a year. Grady had the power of attorney, so Grady had the accounts. Grady would pay everything out of the account, and I would send $625 into that account on the 1st of every month. That was the arrangement. He said it out loud like it was a favor he was doing me, letting me be part of it. And I remember feeling grateful. I want to be precise about that. I felt grateful. $625 a month on third shift wages in 2015. Let me show you what that is instead of telling you. It is picking up every Saturday overtime the plant offers for 11 years. It is driving on a spare for 2 months in the winter of 2017. It is not replacing the water heater until it goes out completely, and you have taken cold showers for 9 days first. It is the trip to Gatlinburg my friend Pris and I had put a deposit on in 2019 that I ate the deposit on. It is Christmas gifts that are always a little bit obviously from the drugstore. In 2022, the payment went up because everything went up, and Grady called and said Mom's costs were running higher, And I said fine, and I moved it to $800 a month for 4 more years. I never told anybody, not one person, not my aunt, not my cousins, not the women at church, not Pris until much later. That was not nobility. I want to be clear about that too. It was 2 things, and neither one of them was noble. The first thing is that, in my family, saying what you have done for somebody is considered low. My mother raised us on that. You do for people and you keep your mouth shut about it. And if you have to tell it, it did not count. The second thing is that some small piece of me thought that eventually somebody would notice on their own. That is the embarrassing part. I thought if I just kept doing it, one day my mother would look up and see it and say it out loud in front of people, and everything that had settled over that house when I was 12 would finally lift. Meanwhile, I was missing things. I worked Thanksgiving in 2018 because holiday pay is time and a half and I needed the tires. I missed my cousin Delia's wedding in Bowling Green because it was on a Saturday and I had picked up the shift 6 weeks earlier. I missed 2 of my mother's follow-up appointments because they were scheduled at 10 in the morning, which, for me, is the middle of the night, and I asked to move them, and they could not be moved. Nobody in my family ever asked me why I was not there. They already had an answer. They had had it for years. The invitations went out 2 weeks later. Mine came in a cream envelope with my name on it in printed script, and I noticed 2 things when I pulled it out of the mailbox. The return address was my brother's office, and it was addressed to Whitney and Guest. My aunt called me on a Sunday evening, which is when she makes her calls. Her name is Dovie. She is my mother's older sister, 74, and she has worn her glasses on a beaded chain since I was small enough to play with the beads. She retired out of the county clerk's office. She has been on the ladies' committee at St. Mary of the Woods for 30 years, which in Whitesville is not a small thing. It is closer to holding an office. She has a voice like warm milk. That is the part people outside my family never understand about her. She has never once raised her voice at me in my life. She said, "Honey, I am going down the list for your mother's party, and I am putting you down for paper plates and napkins." I said that was fine. She said, "And the heavy ones, not the flimsy ones, because Bernie is doing that potato dish, and it goes right through the cheap ones." I said I would get the heavy ones. And then she said, "Well, that is easy enough, since you are not bringing anything else anyway." She said it kindly. That is the thing I need you to hold on to through this whole story. She said it the way you would say it is supposed to rain Thursday. Then she laughed a little at the end, the way she does, and asked me if I was eating right, and told me about her neighbor's knee, and we hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher for a while after that. Not crying, just sitting. Then I got up and looked at the group text. There were 19 people in it. My cousin Bernie Crampa had made it, and Bernie runs the kitchen at the parish hall and has run it for years. So she has a system, and the system is a numbered list. Bernie, ham and the potatoes, Aunt Dovie, 2 salads and the punch, my cousin Delia, green beans, Marvin, ice and setup, somebody's daughter-in-law, rolls, 4 different women, 4 different desserts, which is how it always goes and nobody ever fixes it. Grady, item 1 cake. Grady, item 2 remarks. That was the word on the list. Remarks. My brother had put himself down for remarks. And then, at the bottom, after the folding chairs and the extension cords, item 19. Whitney, paper goods. I want to be careful here because if you have not lived it, this sounds like nothing. A woman is asked to bring plates to a party. So what? Here is what. In a town like Whitesville, the parish hall is not a venue. It is the record. Those same 60 people will see each other at 8 o'clock Mass every Sunday for the next 20 years. They will bury each other. They will bring casseroles to each other's kitchens the week after. Whatever happens in that hall on a Saturday afternoon is not an event. It is an entry, and it goes in permanent. So the list is not a list. It is a seating chart for how the family is understood. The son gives the remarks. The daughter brings the plates. I knew all that. I had known it since I was old enough to notice, which was about 12. And I want you to understand that I did not decide, sitting on that kitchen floor, to do anything about it. I decided the opposite. I decided I was going to buy the heavy plates and the good napkins. I was going to get there early enough to help carry chairs. I was going to sit through the remarks and clap in the right places and hug the right people and stay long enough that nobody could say I left early. And then I was going to drive home and sleep before my shift, because it was my mother's 80th birthday. You only get one of those, and my father did not get his 64th. And I had already done the math on how many more Aprils were realistically in front of us. 2 of them, maybe 4, nobody knows, but you know roughly, and roughly is enough to keep your mouth shut at a party. So that was the plan. Show up, be pleasant, go home. I want that on the record because of what people said about me later. There was no plan. There was no folder yet. On the last Sunday in March, I was a woman who had bought 2 packages of heavy paper plates at the Walmart on Highway 54 and put them in the back of the Escape so she would not forget them. The other thing I did that week was change the furnace filters. I do that 4 times a year at my mother's house. Furnace filters, smoke detector batteries in the spring and fall, and I run the faucets in the back bathroom nobody uses so the trap does not dry out. Small things. The kind of things my father used to do without being asked. And after he died, somebody had to keep doing them, and it turned out that somebody was me. Grady has never changed a furnace filter in that house. I am not saying that to be ugly, he would say, and he would be right, that he has done other things. He handles the accounts. He talks to the insurance people. He goes over there on Sunday afternoons and sits with her and lets her tell him about her programs. But the filters are mine, and the batteries are mine, and the faucets in the back bathroom are mine. So on the last Sunday in March, 2 weeks before the party, I drove out Hayden Bridge Road with 3 filters and a plastic bag on the passenger seat. I want to tell you that I noticed something was wrong the second I walked in. I did not. It took me about 10 minutes. The house was cold, not chilly. Cold. I came through the carport door into the kitchen, and I could feel it on the backs of my hands before I got my coat off. My mother was in the front room in the good chair with a blanket over her legs and 2 cardigans on, the brown one over the gray one, and she had the shopping channel on with the sound down low the way she likes it. I said, "Mom, it is freezing in here." She said it was fine. She said she liked it cool. I went and looked at the thermostat in the hall. 64 degrees. I turned it up to 70, and I heard the furnace catch and start pushing. And I stood there with my hand near the vent until warm air came out, because part of me thought maybe it was broken, and she had not said anything, which would have been very much like her. It was not broken. It had just been set at 64. I did the filters. 2 in the main unit, 1 in the little one over the garage that my father put in himself in the 90s, and that has never once worked right. I put the batteries in the smoke detectors. I ran the faucets in the back bathroom for 2 minutes each, and I wiped down the sink because nobody had... Then I went to sort her pills, which is a Sunday thing. She has a plastic organizer with the days of the week on it, and I fill it. And while I am filling it, I check the bottles against the list I keep on my phone, because 2 of her prescriptions look almost exactly alike, and one time in 2021 she took 9 days of the wrong one. Her bedroom is off the hall. I went in to open the blinds, because she does not open them anymore, and the room gets that closed-up smell. And that is when I looked at the cedar chest. It has been at the foot of that bed my entire life. It is a hope chest, the kind girls in that county got when they graduated, and hers came from her aunt in 1963, and it still has the little brass key that does not turn anymore. On top of it, laid flat, was my father's Bible, the black one with the split spine that he mended himself with cloth tape. Twice, the second time badly. It has his handwriting on the inside cover, and it has a church bulletin from 1991 folded into the back that nobody has ever taken out. I picked it up. I do that. I have picked that Bible up off that chest maybe 100 times since 2009. And I always open it to the inside cover and look at where he wrote his name, because his handwriting slanted hard to the right, and he capitalized the first letter of every single word, even the small ones, even the ands. I stood there holding it for a second, and from the front room my mother said, "Do not get into that chest." Not sharp, not loud. She said it the way you would say, "Do not track mud on the carpet." She could not even see me from where she was sitting. I said, "Mom, I am not in the chest. I am opening the blinds." She said, "All right," and turned the television up 2 clicks. I put the Bible back exactly where it had been, squared to the edge, and I opened the blinds and I went back to the kitchen. I have thought about those 11 seconds more than I have thought about almost anything else in my life. The mail was on the counter by the toaster, in the pile she makes, which is not really a pile. It is more of a drift. She does not throw anything away, and she does not open most of it. Grady picks it up when he comes on Sundays. He always has. I was not snooping. I want to say that because of what got said later. I was moving the mail so I could set the pill organizer down, and the stack slid, and things fanned out across the counter the way they do. Grocery flyers, a church envelope, 2 of those insurance solicitations with the fake handwriting on the front, a card from somebody at the IGA, and an envelope from the Daviess County Sheriff's Office, already opened, with the flap tucked back in. I read it standing up. It was a delinquent tax notice, second half installment, tax year 2025, on the property at Hayden Bridge Road, unpaid. It listed the base amount, and then it listed a penalty, and then it listed interest accruing monthly, and then it listed the date after which the certificate of delinquency would be sold to a third-party purchaser. I read it 3 times. I am going to tell you exactly what I felt, and it was not anger. Anger came much later, and it came slower than you would think. What I felt was confusion so complete it was almost physical, because I had sent $800 into that account on the 1st of November, and on the 1st of December, and on the 1st of January and February and March. I had the confirmations. I always have the confirmations. I took my phone out and I photographed the notice, both sides. Then I straightened the mail back into its drift and put the pill organizer down on top of it. And then I did the thing I have been trying to explain to myself ever since. I did not ask her. She was sitting 15 feet away in a warm room now, in 2 cardigans, watching a woman sell a food chopper, and I could have walked in there and said, "Mom, why are the taxes not paid?" I did not. I said I would see her Saturday at the party. I kissed the top of her head. She patted my hand and asked me if Grady had called about the cake. I sat in the escape in her driveway for 10 minutes before I started it, looking at a photograph of a piece of paper on my phone. I worked that night the way you work when your hands know the job and the rest of you is somewhere else. I pulled staves. I read the meter. I wrote the numbers. Pris asked me twice if I was all right, and both times I said I was tired, which was true, and also not the answer. I got home at 7:15 on Monday morning. I did not go to bed. I made coffee, and I pulled both drawers of that file cabinet out into the hall, and I carried them to the kitchen table. And then I did what I do at work. You do not start with the conclusion. You start with the first row. You write down what is actually there, not what you expect to be there, and you do not skip ahead, because skipping ahead is how you end up certifying a bad batch. My father taught me that, though he was talking about a lawnmower carburetor at the time. I got a legal pad and a red pencil. 2015, first transfer, April 1st, $625. There were 10 of them that year, because we started in April. $6,250, 2016 through 2021. 6 full years, 12 payments a year, $625 each, $7,500 a year, $45,000. 2022 through 2025, 4 full years at $800 a month, $9,600 a year, $38,400. Then January, February, and March of this year, $2,400 more. I added it 3 times because the first 2 times I did not believe it. $92,050. I sat there and looked at that number for a long time. The furnace in my own house kicked on. The neighbor's television came through the wall, a studio audience laughing at something. $92,000 is a house in this county. Not a nice one, but a house. It is the down payment I never made. It is the years I did not go anywhere and the car I did not replace, and it was sitting there in red pencil on a legal pad at 7 in the morning. And I was not proud of it, and I was not angry about it. I was just looking at it. Then I turned the page and did the other column. What did it actually cost to keep my mother in that house? The mortgage payment I knew, because I had heard it 100 times. $410 a month. $4,920 a year. The prescriptions I knew better than anybody, because I am the one who fills the organizer. Her copays have run around $180 a month the last few years. $2,160 a year. The property taxes I now knew exactly because the notice was still on my phone, right at $1,300 a year, both halves together. Add it up, call it $8,400 a year, and round up hard for the things I am not thinking of, and call it $9,000. I have been sending $9,600. For 4 years I have been sending more than the whole thing costs. And the county says the taxes are not paid. I want to describe what that felt like, because I think it is the part people get wrong about stories like this. There was no rush of blood. There was no moment of clarity. What there was a kind of cold that started behind my sternum and moved outward, and underneath it, one very quiet sentence that would not go away. I have never once looked at the other side of this. 11 years, every first of the month. And I had never asked for a statement, never asked for a receipt, never asked where the balance sat. I had done the exact opposite of everything I do for a living. I had measured nothing. I had signed nothing. I had just sent it. Around 9 that morning, I did something I did not know you could do until I did it. The county puts the delinquent tax list online. Anybody can look at it. It is a public record, and it has to be. Because if a certificate of delinquency gets sold, the buyer has to be able to find it. You type in the name or the parcel and it tells you, I typed in my mother's name. Tax year 2025, second installment, delinquent. That one I already knew. Tax year 2024, delinquent, and then paid on the 29th of August of the following year, with a penalty of 10% and interest. Tax year 2023, delinquent, and then paid in September, with the penalty and the interest, 3 years running. Late every time, penalty every time, interest every time. Money that came out of somewhere it did not need to come out of, because there was enough. There had always been enough. I got up and washed the coffee cup and stood at the sink and looked out at the maple. Here is what I want you to understand about that Monday morning, because it is the last morning of the way I used to think. I did not think my brother was stealing from my mother. That thought was not available to me. I could not get to it. Every road that ran toward it was blocked by 46 years of Grady being the one who handles things, and by that hospital hallway, and by the folder he had open on the rolling table before I even got there. What I thought was, he is overwhelmed. He is running a business, and he has Mom, and something is falling through the cracks, and he has been too proud to say so. I actually felt sorry for him. Standing at that sink, I felt sorry for my brother. So I did what a sister does. I called him. He picked up on the second ring. He was in the car. He is always in the car. "Hey, Whit," he said. "Hang on." Then a turn signal ticking, and the sound of him putting me on the speaker, and a radio going quiet. I said I had a question about Mom's taxes. He said, "Oh, yeah, that is in process." I said the sheriff's office had sent a notice. He said, "They send those out automatically. It is a computer. It does not know anything. I have got it on the list." I said the county website shows it went delinquent in 23 and 24 too. There was maybe a second of nothing. Then he laughed. And it was a real laugh, not a nervous one. He said, "You looked it up, Whit. You looked up Mom's taxes on the internet." I said it is a public record. He said, "I know it is a public record. That is not what I am saying." He was still laughing a little. He said, "This is what I am talking about with you. You get a piece of paper and you go all the way to the courthouse in your head." I did not say anything. And because I did not say anything, he filled it. That is the thing about my brother. Silence is a hole and he pours words in it. And if you can just stand there long enough, he will tell you things. He said, "Look, here is the reality of it. Taxes are the last thing that gets paid because they are the only thing with a grace period. The mortgage cannot be late. The pharmacy cannot be late. The county gives you until April and then they give you until August, and it costs a little on the back end, and that is a trade I make on purpose. That is cash flow management. Everybody in business does it," I said, "but there is enough." He said, "Enough for what I said. Enough to pay it on time." And he said, "Whit, you have no idea what that house costs." I said, "Tell me." So he told me. And this is the part I have gone back over more times than any other conversation in my life, because he was not caught, and he was not covering, and he was not lying. He was explaining. He was almost enjoying it. He was showing his little sister how the grown-up part works. He said there was the mortgage and there was the pharmacy, sure, but there was also the yard guy, and there was the roof patch in 21, and the water heater, and her Medicare supplement, and the emergency button service, and the difference on the ambulance ride in 23 that insurance fought for 8 months. He said the numbers move. "Whit, some months it is fine and some months it is not, and I am the one riding it." And then, without me asking, without a single question from me, he said it. He said, "Plus, I take a small management fee out of it, which honestly is under market, and I have never once said a word to you about that either." I asked him what the fee was. He said $200 a month. I asked him how long. He said since 1819, somewhere in there. And Whit, before you say anything, I do the taxes, I do the insurance. I sit on the phone with those people for hours. I drive out there every Sunday. If Mom hired somebody to do what I do, it would cost her 4 times that. Any elder care coordinator in this town, you call and ask them what they charge. I said, "Okay." He said, "No, seriously, call 1. I said, "Okay." "Grady," I was doing arithmetic while he talked. $200 a month. Say it started in January of 2018. That is 8 full years and a piece, just under $20,000. It was almost exactly the amount by which the money I sent had exceeded the cost of the house. He talked for another few minutes. He was in a good mood. He told me about a strip center in Philpott he had under contract. He told me the cake was ordered from the bakery on 2nd Street, the good one, half chocolate, half white, and that it had cost him $190 and he did not care. And then he said the thing. He said, "Hey, and do not worry about the party. I have got the caterer, and I have got the hall, and I am covering the whole thing. And that includes you. So do not you go trying to slip me money for your plate. All right, I have got you. I have got you." I said, "Thanks." He said, "That is what I am here for. Love you. Wit. Drive safe." I was not driving. I was standing in my kitchen. But that is a thing he says. And he meant it. And here is what I need you to hear, because everything after this only makes sense if you hear it. My brother loves me. He was not on the phone that day plotting anything. He has never in his life sat down and decided to hurt me. If you put him under oath and asked him whether he had done right by his mother and his sister for 11 years, he would say yes without blinking, and he would pass a polygraph, because he believes it all the way down. That is what happens when two children grow up in the same house and one of them is handed a version of the story where he is the one who carries everybody. He does not remember where the money comes from. In the house we grew up in, money came from somewhere. It arrived. It was not anybody's job to ask. I hung up and stood there for a while. Then I got my keys and drove to the bank. Davies Federal Savings has a branch on Frederica with 2 teller windows and a coffee pot nobody has ever seen anybody drink from. The woman who helped me was named Charla Teeter. She is 34, and she has a picture of a beagle taped to her monitor. I told her what I wanted. Every outgoing transfer from my account to a specific account number going back to April of 2015. She said that was a records request, and that anything over 18 months old had to be pulled from archive, and that it would be 10 cents a page. I said that was fine. She said, "Do you know about how many pages we are talking about?" I said probably 300. She looked at me for a second, and then she started typing, and she did not ask me a single question about why. And I have thought about that since. She just did their job. There are people who make things easier by not needing to know, and she is one of them. It took 4 business days. I picked it up on a Thursday in a rubber-banded stack 1.5 inches thick that she had to carry out from the back with 2 hands. 323 pages, $32.30. Then I asked her the other question. I asked if there was any way for me to see what came out of the receiving account. She said no. She said, "That account is not yours. It belongs to the account holder and whoever holds authority on it. I cannot show you a thing about it, and neither can anybody else in this building." I said I understood. She said, "Honey, if the account holder is your mother, she can ask for it herself. Or somebody with the paperwork can... Somebody with the paperwork." My brother had the paperwork. I had signed the paperwork. I said thank you, and I carried the stack out to the car. That night I did not go in. I called off, which I do about once a year, and Pris covered me, and she gave me a hard time about it for exactly 11 seconds, and then said, "You okay?" And I said I would tell her later, and she said, "You better." And that was the end of it. I spread 323 pages across my kitchen table and the counter and half the floor. I need to describe what I built, because a lot of what happened later comes down to what was in that folder and, more than that, what was not in it. I bought the folder at the drugstore. It is a plain letter size folder with a metal clasp, and it is blue, and it cost $1.29. And I want to be honest, and say that I picked blue because it was on top. Inside, I put 11 tabs, one for each year. I made them with the label maker my cousin gave me as a joke. Behind each tab went that year's transfers, in order, with the date and the amount and the confirmation number, and each page had the account they went to. At the back, I put 4 pages I printed at the library. 3 of them were the county's delinquent tax records for 23, 24, and 25. The 4th was the notice from the sheriff's office, the one from her kitchen counter, printed off the photo on my phone. And at the very front, on one sheet of paper, in my own handwriting, I put the summary, 11 lines, one for each year, number of payments, amount per payment, total. And at the bottom, one number underlined twice, $92,050. There was not one adjective in that folder. I want to say that again, because it is the only thing I did in this entire story that I am completely at peace with. There was no letter. There was no note. I did not write the words unfair or ashamed or anything else. I did not write my brother's name one single time, just dates, just amounts, just where it went. That is what I know how to do. Measure it, write it down, sign your name to it. I finished around 2 in the morning and I sat there with my hand flat on top of it. And I made my plan. And my plan was this. I was going to go to my mother's 80th birthday party. I was going to bring the heavy paper plates. I was going to help Bernie carry the chairs in from the storage room, and I was going to sit through the remarks and clap. And afterward, when the hall was mostly cleared and Mom was in the car and it was just the 2 of us stacking tables, I was going to hand my brother the folder and say, I think you need to look at this. And then I was going to go home. That was it. That was the whole plan. No room, no audience, no scene. I know how that sounds now. I know what people said later, that I must have been building up to something for weeks, that I had it all worked out. I have heard the version where I planned it. I did not plan it. I planned the opposite of it. I had a plan specifically designed so that nobody in that hall would ever know anything happened. The next night at work, Ray Dunville left a container in the break room fridge with a piece of masking tape on the lid and my name on it in black marker. Ray does that. His wife died in 2019 and he cooks like she is still coming home. And there is always too much. And about twice a month, somebody on our shift finds a container with their name on it. It was chicken and dumplings. I ate the whole thing standing up at 11:40 at night under the fluorescent lights. And Pris came in and looked at me and said, well, at least somebody is feeding you. On Saturday morning, I put the blue folder on the passenger seat of the Escape and laid my coat over it. Whitesville is 22 minutes from my house if the train at Maceo does not catch you. It is a town of about 600 people with a bank, a hardware store, a funeral home, and a church that is bigger than all 3 put together. St. Mary of the Woods sits up on a rise with the cemetery behind it. And behind the church is the hall, which is a low brick building with a metal roof and a gravel lot. Every wedding, every funeral dinner, every first communion breakfast, every pancake supper, every fall festival in that parish for 60 years has happened in that room. I got there at 3 o'clock with 2 packages of heavy paper plates and a sleeve of napkins, wearing the green shirt I keep for funerals and weddings and 1 pair of black flats. Bernie Crampa had the kitchen going. Bernie is 58 and she runs that kitchen the way an air traffic controller runs a tower. And she has a laminated diagram of where the tables go taped inside the utility closet door. She hugged me with her forearms because her hands were wet and she said, "Praise God, somebody who is early." I carried chairs for 20 minutes, 56 of them, from the storage room, 6 at a time on the dolly. The room filled up the way those rooms do. The fluorescent lights were all the way on. Somebody had put butter yellow paper cloths on the folding tables and taped a banner over the pass-through window. There were deli trays and Bernie's potatoes and 4 desserts and a bowl of hard candy from the credit union that shows up at every event in that county. The coffee urn was going, the big stainless one that holds 100 cups, and standing beside it stacking foam cups was Ozetta Borman. Everybody calls her Zetta. She is 83 years old and she was the parish secretary for 40 years, from 1972 until she retired. And she has known me since the day I was baptized because she typed the certificate. She is a small woman. She has a walker now, but she does not put weight on it. She just pushes it around in front of her like a shopping cart. She was stacking cups in towers of 10. She said, "Whitney Bickett." I said, "Hey, Miss Zetta." She looked at me over the top of her glasses for a second longer than a hello needs, and she said, "You still write everything down, don't you?" I laughed. I said something like, "I guess I do." She nodded once, like I had confirmed the weather, and went back to her cups. I took a coffee I did not want and went to find my mother, and I did not think about that exchange again for 7 weeks. My mother was in the good chair. They had carried it over from the rectory, the wingback with the flowered upholstery on it, and set it at the head of the room facing out so everybody who came in went to her first. She had on a new lilac shawl and her hair had been done Thursday. She looked good. She looked genuinely happy. And I need to say that because it is true and because it makes the rest of it worse. I kissed her and told her happy birthday and she squeezed my hand and said, "There she is." And then she asked me if I had seen the cake. Grady had a hand on the back of her chair. He kept it there most of the afternoon. Every time somebody came up, he did the introducing, even for people who had known her 50 years longer than he had been alive. On the head table beside her, next to the card box, there was a black 3-ring binder. I noticed it because it did not belong. Everything else on that table was a card or a flower or a plate. The binder had a printed label in the window on the spine, and the label said, in capital letters, "Mom, expenses." He had brought it to a birthday party. Twice that afternoon I watched him do the same thing. Somebody would say something kind about how he takes care of her, and he would put 2 fingers on top of that binder and pat it, the way you pat a dog, and say something like, "Well, it is a lot of paperwork," and the person would laugh and say, "Bless you." My aunt found me by the plate table. Aunt Dovie had on her good navy dress and her glasses on the chain, and she took the 2 packages of paper plates out of my hands, and she opened the top one right there and counted them into a stack. She said, "Oh, good. The heavy ones." Then she said, 120. Well, that is plenty. And then she straightened the stack and patted it twice and said, "And look at that. You got them here and everything." I said, "Of course I did." And Aunt Dovie smiled at me with real warmth in her face and said, "Well, honey, you always did have a way of losing things that were not yours." Then she picked up the stack and walked it to the serving line. The 2 women at the end of the table were looking at their coffee. One of them made a small sound that could have been a laugh. I stood there for a second, holding nothing. Through the pass-through window, I could see into the kitchen. Tammy was at the sink with a parish apron on, running a rack of trays, and she was looking down into the water. She had been in that kitchen since I got there, and she had not come out into the hall once. When Bernie called out for somebody to bring the 2nd pan of potatoes, Tammy handed it through the window without lifting her head. At 4:30, somebody hit the bank of switches by the door, and half the lights went off, and Bernie came out of the kitchen pushing the cart with the cake on it, and everybody started clapping. They sang. Somebody's grandson had a phone-up recording. My mother blew out 3 of the 80 candles, and Bernie got the rest with a dish towel fanned over the top, and everybody laughed. And it was a good moment. I want that in here. It was a good moment, and I was glad I came. Then Grady picked up a fork and a plastic cup of sweet tea and tapped one against the other, and the room came down. He started with a story. He told about the winter of '94 when the pipes froze at the house on Hayden Bridge Road, and Mom put every pot she owned on the stove and hauled water to the bathroom for 4 days and never once called anybody to complain. And how on the 5th day Dad came home with a space heater and she made him take it back because it was $70. It was a good story. It was true. People laughed in the right place. A couple of the older women nodded, because they had all done that. All of them. All their lives. And this was a room full of women who had hauled water and taken things back to the store. He said, "That is who my mother is." Then he shifted. He said, "And I want to say something about the last 11 years, and I hope you will let me, because it does not get said." He said when Mom had her stroke, everything changed overnight, and somebody had to step up. He counted it on his fingers. He actually did that, in front of everybody, the way he does at a listing presentation. He said, "The mortgage." He put up 1 finger. He said, "The medicine," 2. He said, "The property taxes on that house," which people do not think about, and which do not care whether you are having a hard year. 3. He said, 11 years. And then he said, "I am not telling you that for credit." Somebody at the back said, "Well, you ought to get some." The room laughed. He held up a hand like he was turning it down, and he did not turn it down. He said, "Family is not a thing you get credit for. Family is a thing you do. Some people do it, and some people are not able to, and you love them anyway, and you keep on doing it. That was the turn. I felt it a beat before it came, the way you feel a machine about to bind." He said, "Look, I know Whit has had a lot on her plate." He said my name. He said, "And I know she has not been able to be there for a lot of it, and I am not saying that to be ugly. I am saying it because it is real. Thanksgiving, Delia's wedding, the appointments. Whit works nights, and God love her. Nights will do that to you." 2 of my cousins turned around and looked at me. Not unkindly. That is the part that gets me. There was not a mean face in that room. He said, "And that is all right. That is what a family is for. In every family there is somebody who is carrying, and there is somebody who is getting carried." He looked right at me. He raised the cup a little. He said, "Ours is standing right there by the coffee, and she is the family charity case, and we love her anyway. Happy birthday, Mom." I have replayed the sound of that room 100 times. It was not cruel laughter. It was warm. It was the laughter of 60 people who have known each other their whole lives and who thought they had just heard a brother be affectionate about his little sister in a way that was a little rough, but basically loving, which is how men in that county are affectionate. My cousin Delia laughed with her hand over her mouth. Marvin laughed. The 2 women who had been looking at their coffee at the plate table laughed, and one of them reached over and squeezed my arm on her way past to the dessert line, which I think she meant as kindness. Aunt Dovie did not laugh. Aunt Dovie looked at me over the top of her glasses with an expression of complete, comfortable satisfaction, the way you look at a picture that has finally been hung level. And my mother laughed. She had her hand on his forearm when she did it. She tipped her head back a little and laughed the way she does at the television. 3 quick sounds and then a shake of the head. And she said, "Oh, Grady." And she was still smiling when she looked over at me. She was still smiling when she looked over at me. I did not do anything. There is a sound I know from the plant. The belt on the number 2 saw when it is about to slip. A rising whine that gets thin at the top. I heard that sound. I am not saying I imagined it or that it was a metaphor. I heard it, standing in a church hall in April with a foam cup in my hand, and it went on for what felt like a while. The ice in my cup had melted. I remember that because I looked at it. The tea had gone pale at the top where the water sat. I did not get red in the face. I have been told my whole life that I do not show things, and it is true, and it is not a virtue. It is just what happens to a person who learned early that showing it made it worse. Bernie started cutting the cake. Somebody put the lights back up. The line formed on the left side like it always does because that is how the diagram in the utility closet says to do it. Nobody was looking at me anymore. That took about 9 seconds. I set my cup down on the table by the napkins, and I stood up, and I walked toward the side door. My cousin Delia said, "Hey, are you leaving already?" I said, "No." I said, "I left something in the car." The gravel lot was half in shadow because the sun had come around behind the church. It was warm for April. Somebody's truck was running with nobody in it. I got in the escape and shut the door, and the noise from the hall cut off, and it was very quiet, and I sat there. I want to tell you what I decided in those 40 seconds. But that is not what happened, because I did not decide anything. I have gone looking for the decision, and it is not there. What I remember is my hands on the bottom of the steering wheel and the smell of the plates in the back that I had not needed to bring after all. And one thought that came all the way through with no static on it. He said the property taxes. He stood up in front of my mother and 60 people and said the property taxes. And there is a piece of paper on that woman's kitchen counter that says the property taxes have not been paid, and I am the only person in that building who knows both of those things. I picked up my coat off the passenger seat, and there was the blue folder underneath it. I did not open it. I have never opened it in front of anybody. I walked back across the gravel and pulled the side door, and the noise came back on all at once. Forks and voices and somebody's ringtone and Bernie calling for a knife. Down the middle of the room, between the 2 rows of tables, past Marvin, who lifted his cup at me, past Delia, who was cutting a piece of cake into smaller pieces for the woman next to her, past the card box and the flowers. The cake was on the head table with about 1/3 of it gone and the icing pushed up around the cuts. The box of matches was sitting to the right of the cake plate, where Bernie had set it down after the candles. I put the folder on the paper cloth between them. It made almost no sound. That is the thing nobody believes. There was no moment. Nobody stopped talking. A woman 2 tables over kept telling a story about a hip replacement. My brother was standing 3 feet away with a plate in his hand, and he looked at the folder. And then he looked at me, and he had the beginning of a smile on his face, because at that point, he still thought this was going to be something else. A card, a photo album, a gift. I said 7 words to him. I said, "This is the other side of it." Then I turned and walked back down between the tables and out the side door. I did not slam it. I did not have to. It is a heavy steel door with a hydraulic closer on the top, and it takes about 4 seconds to shut, and I could hear the room the whole time it was closing, and then I could not. I got in the car. I backed out. I did not look at the hall. I drove the 22 minutes home, and the train at Maceo did not catch me. I did not cry. I want to be accurate. I did not cry that day at all. I got home a little after 5:30. I lay down on top of the covers with my shoes on, and I slept for 4 hours, which is more than I usually get. And then I got up and put on my work polo and went in for 3rd shift. Ray Dunville had left a container in the fridge with masking tape on the lid. It was pot roast with carrots and about twice as much of it as a person eats. He had put a slice of bread on top under the lid, which is a thing he does so the meat does not dry out in the microwave, and which nobody has ever explained to him is unnecessary. I sat on the metal bench in the break room at 11:40 at night and ate it under the lights. Pris came in and sat down across from me and did not say anything for a minute. Then she said, "So," I said, "my brother called me a charity case in front of 60 people at my mother's birthday." Pris put both hands flat on the table. She said a word that I am not going to repeat. And then she said, "In front of your mother," I said. My mother laughed. Pris did not say anything for a second. Then she said, "Okay, what did you do?" I said, "I gave him 11 years of bank statements, and Priscilla Ogle, 52 years old, 4'11", who has been running third shift inspection for 19 years, and who has made grown men cry over a mislabeled cart," sat back and put her hand over her mouth and started to laugh. She laughed until she had to wipe her eyes. Then she got up and got herself a coffee and came back and said, "Eat the rest of that." And I did. That was the warmest 20 minutes of that entire spring. My phone went off at 1:40 in the morning while I was on the floor with the meter in my hand. We are not supposed to have them out. I looked anyway because nobody good texts at 1:40. It was Tammy, my brother's wife. In 22 years of marriage to him, Tammy has sent me maybe a dozen text messages, and all of them have been about what time something starts. It was 4 words. Please do not stop. No punctuation after it. No explanation. No follow-up. I stood between the number 2 saw and the sorting table with my safety glasses pushed up on my head and read these 4 words 3 times before I put the phone back in my pocket. I did not answer her until the next morning. And when I did, all I wrote back was, "Okay." Here is what happened in that hall after the door shut behind me. I got it in pieces over the next 2 days from 4 different people, and the pieces all matched. Bernie opened it first, not to be nosy. She was clearing this head table and she picked it up to move it, and the clasp was not fastened, and the summary page slid halfway out. And Bernie Cramp has run a parish kitchen for 20 years, and she can read a column of figures upside down at a glance. She read it standing up. Then she sat down and read it again. By the time my mother's cake was in the refrigerator, 5 people had seen that page. By Monday, everyone in that hall had heard the number. $92,050. My brother could not deny one line of it, and to his credit, he did not try. There is no arguing with a bank confirmation number. He said it was more complicated than it looked. He said there was context. Both of those things were even a little bit true, and neither one of them mattered, because the page did not accuse him of anything. It just sat there being correct. My cousin Delia called me crying on Sunday afternoon. A man I barely know sent me $200 through my phone with a note that said, "From the wedding. Sorry it took so long," which I still do not entirely understand. Grady texted me 5 times. 3 of them explained. 2 of them told me I had picked a hell of a place to do that. And my mother said nothing. Not that day, not that week, not for 7 weeks. She did not call me. And when I called her on the Tuesday, she talked about a storm that had come through and about a woman at church who had fallen. And she did not mention the party, or the folder, or the money, or the word my brother had used. And when I let a silence sit there on purpose, she filled it with the weather. That was the wound, not the toast. I want to be honest about the size of things. The last thing Bernie told me, on the phone Monday night, she almost did not tell me at all. She said that after I left, at table 3, my aunt had leaned over to 2 of the women and said, "Well, the money business is one thing." And then she said, "But nobody has forgotten 2010. I had been living under those 4 words for 16 years. 2010. I had never in my life had one single piece of paper that could stand up next to them. 7 weeks later, in a garage on the east side of Whitesville. I got one. On the Tuesday after the party, there was a glass dish sitting on my front step. It was my Pyrex, the 9x13 with the chip out of one corner, the one I had sent to a funeral dinner in February. Somebody had washed it and dried it and set it on the concrete right in front of my door. There was a note under it, folded twice. My aunt's handwriting, which slopes uphill and has loops on the L's she learned in 1958. It said, "Whitney, returning this. Thank you again. We are all still praying for you and we love you no matter what has gone on. No matter what has gone on." I stood on my own step at 7:15 in the morning holding a casserole dish, having just come off 8 hours on a concrete floor, and I read that sentence 4 times. That is how it starts. Not with a fight, with a clean dish and a kind note. Over the next 10 days, I heard about my aunt from 3 different directions. My cousin Delia called and said Aunt Dovie had been by and had told her that it was a shame the way things had gotten stirred up, and that Grady had made a poor choice of words, but that he did not deserve to be humiliated in front of the whole parish, and that there was history here that Delia was too young to know about. A woman I went to school with messaged me out of nowhere to say she hoped I was doing okay, and something in the way she said it told me exactly what she had been told. And Bernie, who does not gossip and who I trust more than almost anybody, called me and said, "Honey, I am only telling you because you would want to know." She said Dovie had been on the phone with 2 women from the ladies' committee, and that the phrase that had come back to her twice from 2 different people was, well, it is not the first time money has come up missing around Whitney. Not the first time money has come up missing around Whitney. That is a beautiful sentence. If you look at it the way you would look at a piece of equipment, it does not accuse anybody of anything. It has no verb you can argue with. You cannot answer it, because there is nothing in it to answer. And it worked, because it had already worked once. On a Saturday, I went to the grocery in Owensboro. I was in the canned goods aisle with my cart, and I saw a woman I have known since we were girls, Marla, who used to sleep at my house, and she saw me, and she turned her cart around and went down the pet food aisle instead. I stood there in front of the green beans for a while, 'cause I had done this before. I had stood in a grocery store in the fall of 2010 while people made small decisions about which aisle to be in, and I had been 23 years old, and my father had been dead for a year and a half. Here is what I understood in that aisle, and it took me until 40 to understand it. I had thought that the folder settled things. I had proven, with 323 pages in front of the entire parish, that I had paid $92,000 for my mother's house. I had won. On paper, I had won so completely that my brother could not open his mouth about it, and it had changed nothing about who I am to those people, because who I am to those people was not built on money. It was built in October of 2010, and money was just the shape it happened to be wearing this year. Take the money away and it puts on something else. It is not an argument. It is a category, and I have been in it since I was 23, and every new fact just gets sorted into it. You cannot win your way out of a category with receipts from a different year. I went home without the green beans. That night I sat at the same kitchen table where I had spread out 11 years of transfers, and I did the thing I should have done in 2010 and had not. Because in 2010 I was a girl who had just lost her father and who did not know yet that you have to keep your own records because nobody else is keeping them for you. I wrote down what I actually knew about that night. It took 11 lines. Half of them were things somebody had told me afterward. I did not know who counted the money. I did not know when it was counted. I did not know how much was in the box before, or who had it between the time the festival closed and the time somebody said a number out loud. I had never seen a single document. I had never asked to. I had spent 16 years defending myself against a story I did not even know the details of. And there was exactly one place left in the world where a piece of paper from October of 2010 might still be sitting. It took me another 9 days to think of it. The Fall Festival at St. Mary of the Woods is the second Saturday in October, and it has been the second Saturday in October since before my mother was born. It runs from 11 in the morning until the last person leaves. There is a pork chop dinner in the hall and a beer garden out under the trees, because that is a German Catholic parish, and nobody there has ever once thought that was strange. There is a cake wheel. There is a quilt raffle with a quilt the ladies have been working on since January. There is bingo in the school gym. In a town of 600 people, 3,000 come through in a day, from 4 counties. It is all cash. It has always been all cash. Every station has a box. The pork chop line has a box. The beer garden has a box. The cake wheel has a box. When a box gets heavy, somebody carries it to the money table in the old parish office off the back hallway, and it goes in the safe. And at the end of the night, the count committee counts. 2 people count. They both sign. The slip is carbonless. 2 parts. And 1 part goes in the bank bag for the Monday morning deposit, and the other part stays with the parish. 2 signatures on every slip. That is not a security measure somebody dreamed up after this happened. That has been the rule at that parish since the 1960s. In October of 2010, I was 23 years old. My father had been dead 19 months. I was living in a rented room on Crabtree and working part-time at a print shop and taking 2 classes I would not finish. I had lost about 15 pounds that year without trying to. I worked the pork chop line from 11 until about 6:30. I served green beans out of a hotel pan for 7 hours. Twice that afternoon I went out to my car. I want to put that in myself, before anybody else does. Once around 2, to get a sweatshirt, because the wind came up. Once around 6:40. When I left. The reason I left at 6:40 is that my mother had called me at the hall. She had been dizzy since that morning. She had been dizzy on and off all that fall, and she would not go to a doctor. And that day it was bad enough that she called the parish hall phone and asked somebody to come get me off the line. There was no urgent care open in Whitesville after 5. There was not one in Owensboro that took her supplement. Or we thought there was not. And I did not know any better, and neither did she. So I put her in my car, and I drove her to a walk-in clinic on the east side of Evansville, Indiana, 41 miles up the highway, because my aunt had said once that they would see anybody. We were there until almost 9. They said her blood pressure medication needed adjusting and told her to see her own doctor, $25 copay. She fell asleep in the car on the way back. While I was in that waiting room, the count committee counted the festival money. It was short $2,400. I did not find out for 2 days. The way I found out was that my aunt called me and said, "Honey, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know I am asking because I love you." Then she asked me if I had taken anything out of the office at the festival. I said no. I said I had never been in the office. She said, "Well, somebody saw you go out to your car twice." I said I got a sweatshirt and then I left to take Mom to the clinic. And Aunt Dovie said, in that warm voice, "Well, that is what I told them. That is what I told them." Do you hear it? She was not accusing me. She was defending me. She was reporting, sadly, that there was something out there she was having to defend me against. There was never a police report. Father Rowell did not want one, and neither did the committee. $2,400 in cash out of a festival that handles cash all day is not a case anybody can make. It was handled in-house, which in a parish means it was not handled at all. It was simply known. Within a month, this is what I had lost. I had an interview for a teller position at the bank in Whitesville. My mother's cousin was on the board there. The interview got moved twice, and then it stopped getting moved. 2 women I had been close to since grade school stopped calling. One of them, years later, at a funeral, told me she had heard I had a problem and that she had not wanted to enable me. At the parish, I stopped being asked to help with things. That is the quiet one. Nobody tells you. You just notice, over about 2 years, that the sign-up sheet comes around and your name is not on the list of people who get asked. And I told them about Evansville. I told everybody who would listen. I said, I was in Indiana. I was in a waiting room. I have a receipt somewhere. I did not have a receipt somewhere. I had thrown it in a shoebox with everything else, and I could not have found it if my life depended on it. And I was 23, and I did not know that was going to matter. And when somebody finally asked my mother, in the kitchen, whether Whitney had been with her that night, she said, "Oh, I could not tell you which night that was. My head was so bad that fall." She said it in front of me. She did not say I was lying. She said something worse, which is that she could not say. And a woman who could not say became, in about 6 months, in the way these things go, a woman who had no alibi. That October is the month I bought my first spiral notebook and wrote down the date and the odometer. I have never stopped. The parish office is in the old school building, first door on the left, and there is a window unit in it that has been running since the Clinton administration. The secretary now is a woman named Renetta Ford. She is 41 and she is very good at her job, and she was in high school in 2010. I told her I was trying to find out whether the parish still had any records from the fall festival that year. I said it in the flattest voice I could manage, like a person calling about a warranty. She was already shaking her head before I finished. She said, "Oh, honey, when they redid this office in 2016, they took 11 dumpsters out of here. Anything financial before then. If it was not scanned, it is gone." And they did not scan much. They scanned baptisms and marriages and burials, because those you have to keep forever. Everything else went. I said, "So there is nothing." She said, "There is nothing here." She said the word "here," and she did not mean anything by it. She meant the room she was standing in. I said thank you, and I went out and stood in the hallway with the trophy case in it, the one with the volleyball trophies from 1988, and I felt the whole thing close. That is where it should have ended. I want you to sit with that for a second, because everything that comes after in this story happened on a hinge about 2 inches wide. If I had gone straight out the door I parked by, I would have gone home. I did not, because that door sticks and you have to lift it, and I did not feel like fighting a door, so I cut through the church. She was at the side altar with the flowers. There is an arrangement that gets changed every Friday, and somebody has done it every Friday since I have been alive, and that somebody has been Ozetta Borman since about 1980. She had her walker parked against the rail, and she was pulling out the carnations that had gone brown at the edges and setting them on a folded newspaper. She said, without turning around, "Whitney." I do not know how she knew. I have asked her since, and she says the sound your shoes make on that floor is different for everybody, which I think is a thing old ladies say when they want you to be impressed with them. I said, "Hey, Miss Zetta." She said, "Renetta tell you it was all thrown out." I stopped walking. I said, "Yes, ma'am." Zetta took 2 more carnations out and looked at them and put them on the paper. She said it was... Then she said, "Out of that office." And then she said the thing. She said, "Father Kramer told me in 1974 to keep the books 7 years. So I kept them 7 years. And then it got to be 8. And I did not have any instruction about the 8th year, so I did not throw it out, because throwing out somebody else's paper is not my business. She said, I did that for 40 years. I said, Miss Zeta. She said, they are in my garage. I want to be very clear about what she meant, because I did not understand it for a minute and I had to ask her twice. She did not mean she had some of it. She did not mean she had a box or two of odds and ends. She meant the count slips, the deposit tickets, the offertory tally sheets, the festival worksheets, the duplicate copies of everything two people ever signed in that parish between the fall of 1972 and the day she retired in 2012. 40 years of the second copy, I said. Why? She turned around and looked at me, and she had a dead carnation in her hand. She said, because it is not mine to throw away. She said it the same way she would have told me the recipe for her pickled beets. There was nothing dramatic about it. She was not the keeper of the flame. She was a woman who had been given an instruction in 1974 and had never been given a different one. I stood there in the side aisle and I did not know what to say, so I said the only true thing I had. I said, Miss Zeta, in October of 2010 there was money missing out of the festival, and people have said for 16 years that I took it. She did not look surprised. That is the part I was not ready for. She said, I know what people said. I said, did you believe it? And Ozetta Borman, 83 years old, said, honey, I typed the bulletin for that parish for 40 years. I know what people say and I know what the paper says, and those two things get in the same car about half the time. Then she picked up her newspaper full of dead flowers and pushed her walker over to the trash can by the confessional. She said, Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, I am on Biddle Road, the White House with the 2 propane tanks. She said, bring gloves. It is filthy out there. I said, Miss Zeta, thank you. She said, do not thank me yet. Half of it is not labeled the way I said it was going to be labeled. Biddle Road is gravel for the last half mile. The house is white with green shutters, and there are 2 propane tanks in the side yard. And a calico cat came off the porch rail to meet my car like she had an appointment. Zeta had the garage up already. It is a 2-car garage, and there has never been a car in it in my lifetime. Steel shelving on 3 walls, floor to ceiling, banker's boxes, the cardboard kind with the lift-off lids, 4 high and God knows how many deep. Every one of them had a year on the end in black marker, and the marker changed over the decades, from a fat old grease pencil in the early ones to a regular Sharpie in the later ones. There was 1 light bulb on a chain in the middle of the ceiling and a shop light she had clipped to a shelf for me. She said, 1972 starts on that end and it runs that way. I said, Miss Zeta, this is 40 years of paper. She said, well, I did not do it all at once. I put on the gloves. Here is how I worked it. And I worked it the way I work a shift, because that is the only way I know how to do anything. I did not go straight to 2010. That is what you want to do, and that is how you miss things. If 2010 was wrong, I needed to know what right looked like first. So I started with 2013, 3 years after, and I pulled the festival material out and I read it until I understood the shape of it, what forms they used, what order they went in, who signed what, then 2012 and then 2011. By the time I got to the year I actually cared about, I could tell you what should have been in that folder without opening it. That took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Twice in that time, Zeta came out with a folding chair and sat in the doorway and did not talk. Once she said, you want the radio? And I said, no, ma'am. And she said, good. And that was the whole conversation. Around noon, she said, come in and eat. I said I was fine. She said, Whitney Lee, come in and eat. She had made chicken and noodles, the real kind, with the flat egg noodles that go soft and thick, cooked down until the whole pot is one thing. There was a plate of white bread and margarine and a jar of pickled beets she opened in front of me because, she said, an opened jar tastes like an apology. We did not talk about the festival. She would not let me. She talked about her husband. His name was Alton, and he drove a school bus and he died in 1998 of something in his pancreas that took 11 weeks from the day they found it. She said the first year she set 2 places at the table without meaning to, and then one day she did not. And that was worse. I asked her why she never learned to drive. She said Alton liked to drive me. She said it plain, no sighing, and then she got up and put more noodles on my plate without asking me. I want to say something here and then I will get back to the garage. I have a mother. I have had a mother my whole life. I have a brother, an aunt, an uncle, cousins in 3 counties, and a family name that is on a plaque in the vestibule of that church for a window they gave in 1961. And I was sitting at a Formica table on Biddle Road with an 83-year-old woman who was not related to me by blood or marriage or anything else. And it was the first meal in 6 weeks where nobody was measuring me. She kept paper because it was not hers to throw away. That is the whole reason I was sitting there. Not because she loved me. She barely knew me. Because 40 years ago somebody told her a rule and she just kept doing it, straight through every year that everybody else in that parish was busy deciding what kind of person I was. Do you know how much of a life turns on that? On one person somewhere who did not throw it out, we went back out at 1:15. The 2010 box was on the 2nd shelf from the bottom, 3rd from the end. It was heavier than the ones around it, which I noticed when I pulled it, and the lid had warped a little from a summer when the humidity got in. Inside, it went in order. Offertory tallies by month, January through December, in bundles held with those brown clasp envelopes, bulletin masters, a folder for the school, a folder for the cemetery, and then, about 2/3 of the way back, a bundle held together with a black metal binder clip that had rusted into the top page. On the front, in her handwriting, 1 word and 1 number. Festival, 2010. I sat down on the concrete floor with it in my lap. Zetta said, "Well, open it." I am going to walk you through what was in that bundle the way I walked through it on that garage floor, because if I summarize it, you will not feel it. And I felt it 1 page at a time. The first thing was the booth worksheets. Every station gets one. It has the starting change fund at the top, then what got sold, then what the cash should come to. The pork chop dinner, which is the line I worked, sold 612 dinners at $10. $200 starting bank, expected $6,320, cake wheel, beer garden, quilt raffle, bingo, which has its own sheet because the state makes it have its own sheet, country store, fish pond. The second thing was the transfer log. When a box gets heavy, 2 people carry it to the office and put it in the safe, and they write it in a spiral ledger. Time, station, who carried it. 2 sets of initials. I found the line for my station, 6:05 in the evening, pork chop dinner, carried by B, Crampa and R. Bernie carried my booth's box in at 5 minutes after 6. With my mother's cousin, I left the hall at 6:40. The third thing was the count slips. There were 2 of them, and I had never known there were 2, and neither had anybody else who ever said my name in the same sentence as that money. The first count was at 7:15 in the evening. They do that because the safe is not big and the festival runs another 4 hours. Somebody counts what is in there, writes it up, takes it out, and it goes in the bank bag so there is room. It is not a full reconciliation. It is a clearing. The slip has a column for expected, from the transfer log and the worksheets, and a column for counted. Expected at 7:15, $18,740. counted at $16,340. I sat there and did it in my head twice, and then I did it on the back of an envelope with a pen Zetta handed me. $2,400. The money was already gone at 7:15 at night. The pork chop box went in the safe at 6:05, carried by 2 other people. I was on the line until 6:30 and out the door at 6:40, and I had not been in that office once all day. By 7:15, I was somewhere on the Audubon Parkway with my mother in the passenger seat, and the shortage was already sitting there, in the count, in ink, in 2010. Everything anybody ever said about me came from the second count, at 9:40, when somebody looked at the night as a whole and said, "We are 2,400 short," and then people started remembering who they had seen go out to a car. Nobody ever showed them this slip. Nobody in that parish outside of the count committee ever saw this piece of paper in their life. They were told a number at the end of the night, and then they went looking for a reason, and the reason was standing in a hotel pan of green beans and had a dead father and no husband and no money. At the bottom of the second slip, in the margin, in a hand I did not recognize, somebody had written short 2,400, CDH, CDH. And then I looked at the signature lines on the first count slip. The 7:15 count, 2 signatures, because that parish has required 2 signatures since the 1960s. The first one said D.A. Hayden. The second one said M. Hayden. My aunt and my uncle counted that money at 7:15 in the evening, and it was already short when they wrote the number down, and my aunt signed her name to it. I did not say anything for a while. There is a thing that happens in your hands. It is not shaking exactly. It is more like the paper gets heavier in a way you know is not real. I had to put the slip down flat on the concrete to keep reading it. Zetta was still in the folding chair in the doorway. She said, "Is it what you thought?" I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "It is more than I thought." And she said, "Well." Then she said something I have not been able to put down since. She said, "I have wondered about that one for a long while." I looked up at her. She said, "I was in the office that night until about 8. I did not count. I never counted. I typed, but I filed that slip on the Monday, and I looked at it the way you look at anything you file, and I thought, that is a strange one. And then I put it where it went. I said, 'Miss Zetta, you knew there were 2 counts.' She said, 'Everybody who worked in that office knew there were 2 counts. It is not a secret. It is just a piece of paper in a box that nobody ever asked for. 16 years. Nobody ever asked for it.' I sat on that floor with my back against the shelving, and I thought about how simple it would have been, in November of 2010, for one single adult in my family to walk out to this garage and ask a woman for a folder. I said, 'Miss Zetta, are the boxes for 2008 and 2009 out here too?' And Zetta Borman looked at me for a second, and then she got up out of that folding chair a lot faster than an 83-year-old ought to be able to. We found the 2009 box first because it was at eye level. Same bundle, same clip, same handwriting on the front, 2 counts, 7:20 in the evening and 9:50. The first count that year was short $960. Signed. At the bottom, D. A. Hayden and M. Hayden. Zetta went up on her toes and got 2008 off the shelf above and handed it down to me without a word. Short $410. Same 2 signatures. 3 years in a row. My aunt and my uncle were the 7 o'clock count, and 3 years in a row, the 7 o'clock count came up short. But that is not the part that made me sit back down on the floor. In the 2008 box, filed 3 weeks after the festival, there was a deposit ticket for $410, and clipped to it a slip in Zetta's handwriting that said, "Anonymous donation, festival account, received from D. Hayden." In the 2009 box, 5 weeks after, a deposit for $960. Same slip, same wording, same name. Exactly the amount, both times. "To the dollar," I said. "Miss Zetta." She said, "I know it." She said she brought it to me in an envelope in the office both times. Cash. She said it was from a person who did not want to be named, and that is not unusual. We get that. And I wrote it up, and I put it in the account, and I did what I was told. I said, "But you kept a note." And she said, "I keep a note when a thing is not ordinary." She was quiet for a second, and then she said, "And the second year, when it was the same to the dollar?" I did think about it. I thought about it for about a day, and then I decided it was not mine to think about. There was no 2010 deposit ticket. I went through that box twice. There was nothing. No envelope, no anonymous donation, no slip in Zetta's hand. $2,400 is not 410. $2,400 is not something you can put back out of the coffee can on top of the refrigerator. So that year, for the first year, it could not be covered. And when a hole cannot be covered, it has to be somebody's. I drove home and I did not go to bed, and I sat with my laptop at the kitchen table and I did not find anything, because you do not find things like this on a laptop. I found it 2 days later from Bernie, in about 90 seconds, on the phone, because Bernie has run a parish kitchen for 20 years, and there is nothing in that county she has not heard. I asked her one question. I asked whether Uncle Marvin had ever had money trouble. Bernie went quiet. Then she said, "Honey, Marvin Hayden bet ball games out of the back of Denny Wathen's barber shop from about 06 until 010, and everybody in Whitesville knew it, and Dovey thought nobody did." I said, "How bad?" She said, Not bad like the movies. Bad like a man on a fixed income who was down $400 every couple of months and could not tell his wife." And I remembered something. In the spring of 2011, Uncle Marvin sold his boat. It was a 19-foot Sylvan he had kept covered under a carport for 11 years and had taken out maybe 6 times. I remember it because my father had helped him back it in the first summer he had it. And because when Marvin sold it, my mother said, "Well, that is a shame." And my aunt said, "He never used it anyway," in a voice like a door closing. Here is what I put together sitting at my table, and I want to be careful, because this part is the part I built myself out of pieces, and I have never claimed otherwise. Marvin got behind. Not far. He got behind the way small men get behind, and Dovey, who ran the count for the ladies' committee, who had the box and the safe and the pen, took what was needed out of a night that handled $40,000 in cash in a room with no cameras, and put it back a few weeks later when the annuity check came in, and told the parish it was a donation from somebody who did not want to be named. 2 years. She got away with it and nobody was hurt. The third year it got out ahead of her. $2,400. And no annuity check on earth was going to cover that before somebody asked. So she needed a name. And this is the thing I have had to make my peace with. And it took me most of the summer. She did not pick me because she hated me. I have looked for the hatred and it is not there. She sends me a birthday card every year, and she has never once forgotten. She picked me because I was the cheapest. I was 23. My father was dead, and my father was the only person in that family who ever put himself between me and a story. My mother was sick and afraid and not in the business of contradicting her older sister about anything. My brother was 30 and building something and had no particular use for me. And the family already had a shelf I fit on. She did not have to make anybody believe I was that kind of person. Everybody already halfway did. All she had to do was set my name down next to a hole and let people carry it the rest of the way. That is what it costs to be the one they worry about. It costs you the benefit of the doubt, and you do not find out you have been spending it until the day you need it and it is gone. I had the count slips. I had the deposits. I had 3 years of a pattern in one woman's handwriting, but I did not have myself. Not yet. I could prove somebody else was short before I ever touched a box. I could not yet prove where I was. There is a plastic tub in the bottom of my hall closet with a lid that does not fit right anymore. It has moved with me 5 times. 2 apartments, the rented room on Crabtree, the house Cody and I had on Byers, and then the duplex. Every time I have moved, somebody has picked that tub up and said, "What is in this?" And I have said papers, and they have put it in the truck. In it are 16 spiral notebooks and 1 shoebox with packing tape around it. I pulled it out on a Sunday morning in the first week of June and sat on the floor of my hallway with the closet door open. The notebooks are the mileage, 1 a year, more or less. The oldest one is a Mead composition book with a green cover that cost me 89 cents at the drugstore, and I have not opened it in probably 10 years. I opened it that morning. The first entry is dated the 11th of October, 2010. That is a Monday. That is 2 days after the festival, and 1 day after my aunt called me on the telephone and asked me, because she loved me, whether I had taken anything out of the office. The first line reads October 11, odometer 144296, to work and back. And then, above it, squeezed in at the very top of the page, in smaller writing, angled up the way you write when you are adding something to a page you have already started. There is one more line. October 9, Whitesville to Evansville and back, 82 miles. Took Mom to the clinic. I wrote that on the 11th, 2 days after the fact, at 23 years old, sitting in a rented room, in the first hours of understanding that if you do not write it down, it did not happen. That is not proof. I know that. I could have written it any time. A woman's own notebook about her own whereabouts is worth exactly nothing to anybody who has already decided. But it is where I started keeping the record, and that record starts with the sentence nobody believed. Then I cut the tape on the shoebox. I had not opened it since 2011. I know that because on top there was a pay stub from the print shop from March of that year. It was a mess. That is the honest word. It is everything a 23-year-old shoves in a box. Ticket stubs, a phone bill, 2 funeral cards, one of them my father's. A folded page of notebook paper with a car payment schedule on it that I had done in pencil and gotten wrong. Receipts from a hardware store, a gas station, a pharmacy, in no order at all. This is the box I went through in October of 2010 looking for one piece of paper, crying, at midnight, and could not find it in. I went through it that Sunday morning in an hour and 10 minutes, because I did it the way I do a lot now. I emptied the whole thing onto the floor, and I sorted it into piles by kind, and then I sorted each pile by date, and then I went looking. The receipt was in it. It had been in it the entire time. It is thermal paper, the kind that goes off in a decade, and there is almost nothing left on it. You can see the shape of where printing used to be, in the right light, at an angle. You can make out a total of $25 and part of a card number, and the last 4 digits of that card are mine. By itself, 16 years later, it is a blank piece of paper. But underneath it, 4 inches down in the pile of things that came in envelopes, there was the statement. The clinic mailed it about 3 weeks later, the way they do, on regular paper. Because they always send you a statement after they send you a bill you already paid. It is a printed sheet with a logo on it and a perforated stub at the bottom. Patient, Rosemary A. Bickett. Date of service, October 9, 2010. Time of registration, 7:52 in the evening. Facility, Evansville, Indiana. Balance due, 0. Paid at time of service, $25. And down at the bottom, in the little box that walk-in clinics have because half their patients are somebody's mother who did not drive herself, a line that says accompanied by Whitney L. Bickett. I sat on the floor of my hallway with that piece of paper in both hands for a long time. At 7:15 in the evening on the 9th of October, 2010, my aunt signed a count slip that was already $2,400 short. At 7:52 that same evening, 37 minutes later and 41 miles away in another state, my mother checked into a clinic with my name written on the form as the person who brought her. She was there. She was in the room when it was printed. She had the copy of it in her purse when she fell asleep in my car on the Audubon Parkway. She sat at her own kitchen table in that house and heard people ask about that night. More than once. Over years. And what she said was, I could not tell you which night that was. I want to be careful here, because I know what you are already thinking. And I was not there yet. Not that morning. That morning I told myself she was sick that fall. I told myself she was 19 months a widow and dizzy and frightened, and that a woman living like that loses whole weeks. I put the statement in a plastic sleeve. I did not think about my mother again for 3 weeks. I had somewhere else to be first. I had already made the appointment before any of the garage happened. Back in May, I had called a lawyer about the power of attorney, because after the party, I finally admitted to myself that I had signed something in a hospital hallway on no sleep and had never read it. That is all it was. A woman wanting to know what her name was on. Merritt Sandage has an office in a converted house on Frederica with a porch and a hand-lettered sign. She is 55. She has a legal pad in front of her, and she writes on it with a fountain pen. And she does not look at a screen while you are talking. Which, after 11 years of talking to my brother in a moving car, was almost more than I could handle. I brought 2 things, the power of attorney and the parish bundle. She read the power of attorney first, all 4 pages, without saying anything, for about 6 minutes. Then she said, "This is a standard durable form. It is not unusual and it is not sinister. Your mother gave your brother authority over her financial affairs. She was competent when she signed it. And unless that changes, it stands." I said, "Can I see what he does with it?" She said, "Not you. Your mother can ask him for an accounting any day of the week. She can revoke it any day of the week. She is the only one who gave it, and she is the only one who can take it back, as long as she has capacity," I said. "And if she will not ask?" Merritt put the cap back on her pen. She said, "Then that is her choice, and it is a hard one to watch." Then I put the parish bundle on her desk. She read the 2010 count slips. She read the 2008 and 2009 deposits with Zetta's notes clipped to them. She read the clinic statement in its plastic sleeve. She took longer with it than she had taken with the power of attorney. When she finished, she squared the pages up and set her hand flat on top of them. She said, "I want to make sure you understand what you have, and also what you do not have." She said, "Criminally, there is nothing. There was never a report. That is 16 years old, and it is gone, and it was gone a long time ago." She said, civilly, "There is nothing for you. The money that went missing was not your money. It was the parish's money. You have no claim on it and no standing to bring one." She said, "If the parish ever wanted to pursue it, and I do not believe for 1 second they would be 16 years too late as well." She said, "So there is no case here." I said, "I know." She said, "Then I need to ask you what you want." And I sat in that chair with the window unit going, and I understood that I did not have a lawyer's answer. I said, My aunt made me a thief in front of a parish when I was 23, and my father had been dead a year and a half. And nobody has ever unmade it, and it does not come off. Money did not take it off. I proved with 300 pages that I have been paying for my mother's house for 11 years, and inside of 10 days it was, well, that is one thing. But nobody has forgotten 2010. I said, I do not want her money, and I do not want her in trouble. I said, I want it in the record. I want there to be a piece of paper somewhere that says it was not me. And I want it in the same place where the story started, because that is the only place it counts. Merritt Sandage nodded slowly. She said, I cannot get you that. A court cannot get you that. Then she said, but I would point out one thing to you. Those records are not evidence in a case. They are the parish's own books. If a parish decides its own books are wrong, correcting them is not a legal action. It is bookkeeping, she said, and it is theirs to do, not mine. I asked her what she would do if she were me. She said, I would think very hard about the size of the room. She said, most people in your position want the biggest room they can get. They want the whole family in it, and the internet if they can manage it. And what they get is a fight, because a person defends herself in front of a crowd whether she is guilty or not. She said, if you want an admission, use the smallest room that contains the people whose opinion actually built the story. That is the entire fee I ever got out of Merritt Sandage that summer, and it was worth more than the folder. I called the parish office on Monday. Father Rowell retired in 2019, and the priest now is Father Eddie Nall, who is 38 and who has 3 parishes and drives 90 miles on a Sunday. I told him I had documents from the parish's own records from 2008 through 2010, and that I needed 30 minutes with him and with the finance council chair. I told him who else needed to be in the room and why. He was quiet for a second, and then he said, Is Miss Zetta coming? I said, yes. Father. He said, then I will be there. When I told Zetta the date, she said she would ride with Bernie. Then she said, wear something with pockets. I said, why? She said, because you are going to want somewhere to put your hands. We met on the last Sunday in June in the parish office at 10 minutes after 11. 8 people. Father Eddie Nall behind the desk, Bernie Crampe at the end with the Finance Council minute book, because she is the secretary and has been for 9 years. Zetta in the good chair with her walker parked beside her. Me, my aunt and my uncle on the love seat under the window, my brother standing, because Grady stands, and my mother in the wooden chair by the door with her cane hooked over the arm of it, because Grady had brought her, and because she had not said one word to me about anything since the 11th of April. Father Nall said, thank you all for staying. Whitney asked for this, and I said yes. Miss Zetta, I understand you have the parish records, and that is where I did the only smart thing I did all summer. I did not talk. I had thought about it for 2 weeks. If I stood up in that room and started reading numbers, every person in it would have heard a woman defending herself. That is not a sound anybody listens to. So Zetta went first. She had it all in a canvas tote on her lap. She took out the 2010 bundle and she put on her reading glasses, the ones with the tape on the hinge, and she read like she was reading a grocery list. She said, Festival, October 9th, 2010, first count, 7:15 in the evening, expected from the transfer log and the booth sheets, $18,740. Counted, $16,340. Difference, $2,400. She said, signed by 2 counters, as the rule requires, D.A. Hayden, M. Hayden. She looked up over her glasses. She said, "That is the first count. The money was gone at 7:15. Nobody moved." Then my aunt laughed. It was gentle. It was the laugh you use on a child who has said something ambitious. She said, "Zetta, honey, that is 16 years ago and you were not even in that office." Zetta said, "I was there until 8, and I filed that slip on the Monday." My aunt said, "Well, I do not remember it that way, and I do not think a piece of paper from 16 years ago proves one thing except that we were all a lot younger." She turned a little toward Father Nall when she said it, which is a thing she does, addressing the person who can end a conversation. She said, "Father, I love this girl. I have always loved this girl. But we have been round and round about this, and I do not think dragging it all out again in here is good for anybody, and it is certainly not good for my sister." She reached over and patted my mother's knee when she said it, and Zetta Borman said, "All right." Then she reached into the tote and took out 2 more bundles and laid them on the desk. She said, "Festival, 2008, first count, short $410, signed D. A. Hayden and M. Hayden." 3 weeks later, a cash donation to the festival account, $410, anonymous, hand-delivered to the office. I wrote the receipt myself. She said, "Festival, 2009, first count, short $960. Same 2 signatures. 5 weeks later, cash donation, $960, anonymous, hand-delivered to the office." I wrote that one too. She said, both times, to the dollar. She took her glasses off. She said, "Dovey." I never said a word about it for 16 years because it was not mine to say. It is being said now because the girl asked me for it. And I am 83 years old, and I am not going to sit in this room and let it be said that a piece of paper does not prove anything. The window unit cycled off. That is what I remember about the next few seconds. It cycled off and the room got very loud with quiet. My aunt started to say something, and my uncle said, "Dovey." Marvin Hayden has never in his life been the loudest thing in a room. He drove a beer truck for 31 years, and he has a tremor in his right hand now that he keeps in his lap when he is out. He was looking at the carpet. He said, "I got behind with a fella at Denny's shop. It went on a good while. She covered it and I let her." He said, "And that year it got up too high to cover." That was all he said. 4 sentences. He never once looked up. My aunt did not admit anything. I want to be exact about that, because people have told it wrong since Dovey Hayden did not confess, and she has not confessed to this day. She took her glasses off her face and folded them and held them in both hands in her lap. And she stopped talking, and she did not say another word in that room. Then I spoke. For the first time in 20 minutes. I took the plastic sleeve out of my pocket, and I set it on the desk in front of Father Nall. I said, "This is a statement from a walk-in clinic in Evansville, Indiana. It is dated October 9th, 2010. I said, "Registration time, 7:52 in the evening. That is 37 minutes after the count. In another state," I said, "the patient is Rosemary A. Bickett." And I said, "At the bottom, there is a line that says accompanied by, and the name on that line is mine." I picked it up, and I turned it around and I held it out toward the wooden chair by the door. I said, "Mom." She did not take it. She looked down at her hands in her lap. At the ring she has not been able to get off since 2017, and she turned it a quarter turn with her thumb, and she did not look up, and she did not say anything at all. Father Nall let it sit for a second. Then he said, "Whitney, what do you want this parish to do?" I told him 3 things. and I had them written on an index card in my pocket because I did not trust myself to say them right. 1. Put the 2010 count slip in the Finance Council minutes so it is part of the parish record and not a thing in a garage. 2. Print a correction in the bulletin. Not my name, not anybody's name, just the fact. 3. Nothing else. No letter to the diocese, no meeting about it, no calls to anybody. Father Nall looked at the card when I handed it to him. Then he looked at Bernie, and Bernie said, "I can do the minutes today." The bulletin came out 2 Sundays later. It ran at the bottom of page 3, under the Knights of Columbus fish fry schedule, in the same font as everything else, and it was 3 lines long. A review of parish financial records from the 2008 through 2010 fall festivals has identified discrepancies in the first count of each of those years. The parish council has reviewed the original count sheets. Any statements made in the past regarding individuals not involved in those counts were made without reference to the records. That is it. That is the whole thing. Individuals not involved in those counts, 16 years, and it fit under a fish fry. 4 people called me that week. My cousin Delia, who cried and said she had been 11 years old and had believed what she was told and had gone on believing it into her 30s without ever once turning it over. Bernie, who did not apologize, because Bernie never believed it in the first place and told me so at the time, and I had forgotten that, and I sat down when she reminded me. A man named Gerald All, my mother's first cousin, who had been on the bank board in Whitesville in 2010. He talked around it for 4 minutes, and then he said, "That interview?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well," and then he could not get anything else out, and he hung up. And Marla, the woman who turned her cart around in the canned goods aisle. She called me from her car in a parking lot, and she cried so hard she had to put me on hold twice. And what she kept saying was, "I have known you since we were 7. My aunt did not call. She resigned from the ladies' committee in the middle of July. She did not make an announcement, and nobody made one for her. Her name came off the funeral dinner list, and then off the flower rotation, and then the rest of it. Over about 6 weeks. The same slow way my name had come off things in 2011. She has not apologized. I do not expect her to. I have thought a lot about whether I need her to, and the honest answer is that I stopped needing it somewhere in that garage. And here is what it cost. Not everybody in that family read the bulletin the way you would think. Within a month, there was a second version going around, and the second version was that Whitney had spent her spring dragging a 74-year-old woman and a sick 80-year-old woman through the mud over money that was not even hers, at a church, in front of a priest, and that whatever her aunt had done or not done in 2010, there is a way to handle a thing in a family, and this was not it. My brother did not invent that version, but he carried it. He carried it to 2 of our cousins and to at least 1 man at the parish and probably others I do not know about. And what he said, more than once, was, "I just do not know what she is trying to prove. I just do not know what she is trying to prove." The scapegoat does not stop being the scapegoat because she was right. She becomes the scapegoat who was right, which is worse, because now there is a reason to resent her. Tammy came to my door on a Thursday evening in the last week of July. She did not come in. She stood on the step with her keys still in her hand and her car running at the curb. And I have known this woman since I was 17, and I do not think we have ever been alone together for 5 minutes. She held out a business envelope. It had already been opened. Somebody had slid it across the top with a letter opener a long time ago, and the paper had gone soft at the fold. She said, "This is not mine, and it was never his either." I said, "Tammy, "What is it?" And she said, "I am not going to be the one to explain it to you." Then she said, "I have to go." And she went. I did not open it that night. I put it on the counter and I looked at it about 9 times, and then I went to work. That Saturday, Zetta made me come out to Biddle Road for supper. She had a ham and she had made a pie out of the peaches she puts up in July, and she sent me home with 2 jars and a spiral notebook still in the plastic. I said, "Miss Zetta, I have 16 of these." She said, "Then you will have 17. She walked me out to the car with the walker in front of her, over gravel, which she is not supposed to do, and at the door she put her hand on my arm. She said, "You got your name back. That is not nothing. People will tell you it does not matter what folks think, and those people have never had it happen to them." Then she said, "Now what are you going to do about your mother?" I said I did not know what she meant. She said, "Yes, you do." I drove home at 11 o'clock at night with 2 jars of peaches rolling around on the passenger floorboard, and the thing I had not let myself say out loud since June sat in the seat next to me the whole way. My mother was in a clinic in Indiana at 7:52 in the evening on the 9th of October, 2010. She knew where I was. She knew it every single day for 16 years. Why did she sit still? I got home at 11:20. I did not sleep. At 2 in the morning, I opened Tammy's envelope. There was 1 page in it, a photocopy, and not a good one, gray at the edges the way a copy of a copy goes. At the top was a letterhead I had never seen in my life. Ohio Valley Mutual Life, an address in Cincinnati, a logo with a riverboat in it. It was dated the 14th of June, 2010. It was addressed to Mrs. Rosemary A. Bickett at the house on Hayden Bridge Road. The body of it was 4 sentences of insurance language that I read 6 times and understood about half of. It referred to a policy number. It referred to the death of the insured. It said the company's records indicated that benefits under the referenced policy remained unclaimed. And it asked that the addressee contact the claims department at her earliest convenience regarding the status of the named beneficiary. The status of the named beneficiary. And in the upper right corner, in ballpoint, in handwriting I have known my entire life, somebody had written FWD to G office, 3 letters and a word. I did not know what the policy was. I did not know whose name was on it. I did not know what any of it meant. And I want to be honest that at 2 in the morning in my kitchen I could not have told you whether it was good news or bad. I understood exactly 2 things. It had something to do with my father. And a letter that came to my mother's mailbox in June of 2010 had been sent somewhere else. I sat there, and I thought about a delinquent tax notice sitting under a grocery flyer on a kitchen counter in March. And about my brother picking up her mail every Sunday afternoon for years. And about how I had told myself in the spring that this whole thing started with a stroke in a grocery store parking lot in 2015. It did not start in 2015. Something in that house was already running in June of 2010, 4 months before a cash box came up short at a fall festival, and the handwriting in the corner of that page was not my brother's. 3 days later, my mother called me. She had not called me first, not once, since before her birthday. She let it ring twice, and then she said my name like she does, Whitney Lee, all of it, the way she has said it since I was small. She did not mention the folder. She did not mention the parish office. She did not mention Tammy or the bulletin or one single thing that had happened since April. She said, "You need to come out here and get your daddy's things." I said, "All right." When she said, "Thursday," and I drove out Hayden Bridge Road that Thursday afternoon thinking I was going to be handed a box of neckties. The house smelled like pine sol. That was the first thing. My mother has not cleaned that house herself since 2015. And Grady pays a woman named Roberta to come every other Wednesday and do the floors and the bathroom. And Roberta is good, but Roberta does not move furniture. Somebody had moved furniture. The recliner was pulled out from the wall. The runner in the hall had been taken up and shaken and put back down crooked. There were vacuum lines on the carpet in the front room going 2 directions. My mother was at the dining room table, not the good chair. The table, in a straight-back chair, with her cane hooked on the edge of it, which meant she had walked in there on purpose and sat down and was waiting. There were 3 shoe boxes in front of her and a plastic grocery bag. She said, "Sit down. You make me nervous standing." So I sat down across from my mother for the first time since the 11th of April. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing. We talked about the heat, which had been over 90 for 9 days. We talked about the persimmon tree in the side yard that has never made a decent persimmon in 50 years, and that she will not let anybody cut down. We talked about a woman from church who had gone into the hospital in Owensboro and come home again. She told me Grady had finally closed on the tract at Philpott, and that it had been a headache, and that he had been working too hard. She said it like she says everything about my brother, which is with a kind of relief in it, like she is reporting good weather. I said that was good, and the whole time I was doing a thing I have done my whole life without ever once naming it. I was waiting for one sentence, not an apology. I want to be precise, because I have gotten this wrong in my own head before. I was not waiting for "I am sorry." I would not have known what to do with it. I was waiting for one sentence that acknowledged that the thing had happened. Anything. Well, that was a mess. Or, I did not know what to say to you in June. Or even, I wish you had not done it that way. Any sentence at all that admitted there had been a Sunday in June, and an April, and 16 years. She talked about the persimmon tree. I want to tell you why that is worse than a fight. In a fight, the thing exists. 2 people are standing in the same room agreeing that a thing is there, and they are on opposite sides of it. But it is there. My mother has a way of putting a thing outside the house. It does not get argued with. It gets left in the yard. Then she pushed the shoe boxes across the table. She said, "I am not going to be able to do this later, so we are doing it now." The first one was ties, 9 of them, rolled, 2 clip-ons from before he learned, which he told me about once, laughing at himself, a grown man of 26 learning to tie a tie from a man at the mill. The second one had his union pins in it. 5 years, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. The 30 was still in the little box with the cotton in it because he had never gotten around to putting it on anything. There was a stopwatch. He used it to time the kiln cycles at home for no reason at all, because he liked knowing. The third box was photographs. Most of them are the mill, men in the 80s with sideburns standing in front of stacks of staves. My father is in 11 of them, and in 9 he is looking somewhere off to the side because he hated having his picture taken. But there was one on the bottom, a small square one with the white border, and it is him and me on the back steps of that house. I am maybe 9. He is holding a coffee cup, and I am holding a clipboard. I do not remember a clipboard. I have no memory of it. But I am 9 years old on those steps holding a clipboard with a pencil on a string, and I am showing him something on it, and he is looking at it. He is looking at what is on the page. I put that one in my shirt pocket, and I did not say anything about it, and neither did she. The plastic bag was his work boots. She said, "I do not know why I kept these." I said I would take them. I had the photocopy of the insurance letter folded in my back pocket the entire time. I had brought it out there with the full intention of putting it on that table. I had practiced how I would ask it. What is Ohio Valley Mutual Life? And I did not ask. I have thought about why, and I have got 2 reasons. And the first one is that I was tired. The parish office was 5 weeks behind me, and I was worn down in a way I had not been since my divorce. The second reason is that some part of me already knew that whatever was on the other side of that question was going to be the last thing. And once you ask the last thing, there is nothing after it. So I stacked the boxes, and I said I would come get the rest another time, and I stood up to go. And my mother, sitting at that table, looking straight ahead at the china cabinet, said one more thing. She said, "Go on back in the bedroom." She said, "That chest, the bedroom is the second door. The blinds were open, which they never are, and the bed was made with the chenille spread she has had since the 90s. The chest is at the foot of it, cedar, with the brass corners going green and a brass key in the lock that has not turned since the 80s. It came to her from her Aunt Bernadine in 1963 when she finished school, and there is a paper label glued inside the lid with the manufacturer's name on it that has gone the color of weak tea. My father's Bible was on top of it, squared to the edge, the way I had put it back in March. I picked it up, and I set it on the bed. Then I knelt down and lifted the lid, and cedar came up out of it. That smell that does not change, that has been exactly the same smell my entire life. I am going to take this slowly because that is how it went. On top was a wool blanket, folded in thirds, the green plaid one from the couch in the old den. Underneath that, her wedding dress, folded flat in white tissue that had gone brittle and cracked when I touched it. It is not a fancy dress. It is a knee-length dress from 1968 with a satin band, and they were married on a Tuesday morning because Tuesday morning was free. Under the dress, a tin, a Christmas cookie tin with a horse-drawn sleigh on the lid, full of buttons. Hundreds of buttons. Every button off every coat that family ever wore out, saved by a woman who grew up with people who did not throw away a button. Under the tin, a photograph album with a padded cover, and a bundle of birthday cards with a rubber band that had gone hard and snapped when I lifted it. And under all of it, flat against the bottom of the chest, an envelope. It was ivory-colored, business size, the kind that comes in a box of 100 from the drugstore. The edges had gone the yellow that paper goes when it sits. It was sealed. It had never been opened. The flap was down and the glue had held, and along the seams somebody had run a piece of clear tape a long time ago, and the tape had gone brown and lifted at both ends. On the front, in ballpoint, in my father's handwriting, which slants hard to the right and which capitalizes the first letter of every word, even the small ones, even the ands. It said, "For Whitney Lee," to be given on her 25th birthday. Under that, smaller, in the corner, the way he dated everything. The way he dated the back of the water heater and the inside of the fuse box door. February 2009. My father died on the 14th of March, 2009. He wrote that 4 weeks before he died. I turned 25 in March of 2012. I knelt on the floor of that bedroom and did arithmetic I did not want to do. 14 years. Not 14 days late. Not 14 months. 14 years. And it had been 3 feet from where my mother slept for every one of them. And I had stood in that room in March with my hand on his Bible and been told not to get into the chest. I did not open it there. I want to say why. Because I have been asked. It was not restraint. I was not being noble. I did not open it there because I was not going to let it happen in a room where somebody could watch my face. I put the blanket and the dress and the tin and the album back the way they had been. I closed the lid. I put the Bible back on top of it and squared it to the edge. Then I walked out to the dining room with the envelope in my hand. She had moved. In the 4 or 5 minutes I had been in that bedroom, my mother had gotten up from the dining room table and gone into the front room and gotten herself into the good chair, and she was sitting in it, facing the window with her hands in her lap. I stood there in the doorway holding it. I said, "Mom, do you know what is in this?" She said, "Yes." She did not turn around. She said it to the window. I said, "How long have you known?" And my mother did not answer me. She did not say a long time. She did not say I meant to. She did not say I forgot, which would have been a lie but would have been something. She sat in a chair looking out at a yard she has looked at for 52 years, with her hands folded, and she let the question stand there in her house until it stopped being a question and became just a sound somebody had made. I have never in my life been more certain of anything than I was in that hallway. And what I was certain of was this. She was not going to answer me because she had already decided, some time ago, probably years ago, that she was never going to answer anybody about this as long as she lived. I said, "All right." I picked up the shoe boxes and the bag with the boots. I put the envelope on top of the stack and I carried it all out to the escape and I put it on the passenger seat. I backed out of that driveway and I got about 3 miles and then I turned in at the church lot, up by the cemetery fence, and I shut the engine off. The church lot is gravel and it runs up along the cemetery fence, and from where I parked I could see the corner where my father is, 4 rows in, second stone from the end, next to his own mother. I ran my thumb under the flap, and the old glue let go almost without tearing. There were 2 pages, both sides, on lined paper out of a legal pad, and his handwriting filled them edge to edge because he wrote the way he did everything, without wasting the material. I am going to tell you what it said, and I am going to keep his words where I can, because they are not mine. He started by apologizing for the writing. He said he was at the kitchen table at 10 after 5 in the morning, and that his hand was cold and he was not going to copy it over. Then he said the doctor in Owensboro wanted to do a test in April and that he had a feeling about it, and that he was not going to say more than that because he did not want to be dramatic and because he might be wrong. He was not wrong. He never got to April. Then he got to the business part, and the business part is 4 sentences long because that is how he was. He wrote that in 1994, he had taken out a life insurance policy through the union at the mill. He wrote the name of the company, Ohio Valley Mutual Life, and he wrote that the policy was paid up in 2002 and that it did not cost anything anymore. He wrote the face amount, $86,000, and he wrote, "I put your name on it." Then he wrote the rest. And the rest is the part I have read more times than I have read anything else in my life. He said, "I want to tell you why, because if I do not tell you why, you will think it is because I felt sorry for you, and that is not it." He said he had sat at that kitchen table for 30 years. He said that somewhere along the way, and he did not know exactly when, and he was not sure anybody had decided it on purpose. This family had gotten to where it had 2 kinds of children in it. He said there was the kind you brag on, and there was the kind you worry about, and that once a person got put in one of them, nothing they did after that moved them. He said, "You got put in the wrong one, and you never did one thing to deserve it." Then he wrote it about the winter I was 21, when the water pump went out on my first car. And he said he had been standing in the hall and heard my mother on the telephone tell me that things were tight and that Grady had his own troubles right now. He wrote, Grady had bought a boat that spring. He said, "I have never said a word about any of it, not once in 30 years. I let it go on in my own house because I did not want the fight and because your mother is who she is and her sister is who she is. And I told myself you were tough. He said that was cowardly and I have known it a long time. And then he wrote the line. He wrote, "This money is not to help you out. This is me finally saying it out loud where somebody has to hear it." He said he had thought about telling me while he was alive and had not been able to make himself, and that a man ought to be able to say a thing to his own daughter at the kitchen table, and he never could. At the end, he explained the age. He wrote, "I told your mother to give you this on your 25th birthday and not before. At 23, a person spends it. At 25, you will have your feet under you." He wrote, "Do not tell your brother what you do with it. It is not his to have an opinion about." And then the last line, and the last line is nothing. That is why it took me apart. He wrote, "Be sure and get the oil changed in that car. It is past due." Then his name, not Dad. He signed it Vernon, the way he signed the fuse box and the water heater. I read it twice. The first time I read it fast, the way you do, going ahead of yourself. The second time I read it one line at a time, and it took a long while. It got dark while I was sitting there. I did not turn on the dome light. There is enough light from the pole by the cemetery gate to read by if you hold the paper up toward the windshield, so that is what I did. And my arms got tired, and I kept doing it. 14 years. In 2013, I worked 3 jobs, the print shop and a gas station on the bypass on weekends, and I cleaned 2 offices on Tuesday and Thursday nights. In 2016, my marriage came apart, and it came apart over a lot of things. But a good half of what we fought about the last year was money. And one of the last real conversations Cody and I had, he asked me why I was sending $625 a month to a woman who had never once in her life stood up for me. I did not have an answer for him then. I still do not have a good one. For all 14 of those years, there were $86,000 sitting in Cincinnati, Ohio, with my name on them, 3 feet from where my mother slept. I folded the pages back along the creases he had made and put them in the envelope. I put my seatbelt on. Then I drove to Biddle Road, and I got there a little after 9 at night, and every light in Zetta Borman's house was already off. I knocked anyway. It took her a while. The porch light came on, and then the inside light, and then Ozetta Borman opened her door in a housecoat at 9:15 at night, 83 years old, and did not say one word about the hour. She said, "Come in here." I sat at that Formica table, and I handed her 2 pages of legal pad paper, and she read them with her glasses down on the end of her nose. And she did not make a sound the whole time. When she finished, she took her glasses off and set them on the table and put both hands flat on either side of the letter. She said, "Well," then she said, "Your daddy was a decent man and a coward, and both of those can be true." I said, "Miss Zetta." She said, "I am not being ugly. He says it himself right there. He knew what was happening in that house, and he let it happen for 30 years, and then he wrote you a letter about it after he was safe from having to say it out loud." "That is what it is." She tapped the page twice with 2 fingers. She said, "And it is still the truest thing anybody in that family has ever put down on paper." She got up and put the kettle on, which is what she does instead of sitting still. She said, "Now here is what you are going to do." She said, "You are going to go find out about that policy. You are not going to go back out there and ask your mother about it, because she has already told you everything she is ever going to tell you. And you sitting in that driveway waiting on the rest of it is going to eat 10 years off your life." She said, "Go find the paper. Do not go looking for the apology." I was in Merritt Sandage's office at 8:30 the next Monday morning. She read the letter. She read the photocopy Tammy had given me. She wrote about a page and a half on that legal pad while I sat there. Then she told me 4 things. And she was careful. And she stayed inside the 4 corners of my father's file the whole time. She said, life insurance does not go through a will, and it does not go through probate. It is a contract. The company pays the person named as beneficiary on the policy, and nobody else, and no other family member can take that away or claim it in her place. She said, a paid-up policy does not lapse for non-payment because there is nothing left to pay. If that policy was paid up in 2002, it has been in force this entire time, she said. Benefits do not expire because nobody claimed them. There is no deadline on the beneficiary side. That money does not evaporate. And she said, there is a free tool for exactly this situation, and more people need to know about it. She wrote it on the pad and turned it around so I could read it. The National Association of Insurance Commissioners has run a life insurance policy locator since November of 2016. It is free. You submit a request and it goes out to the participating companies, and any company that finds a policy where you are the beneficiary contacts you directly. Since they started it, it has connected more than $10 billion in benefits nobody had claimed, to people who mostly did not know a policy existed. She said, you will need his social security number, his full legal name, his date of birth, and his date of death, and they take that off the death certificate. And she said, it can take up to 90 business days to hear anything, so do not sit by the mailbox. I did not have a copy of my father's death certificate. I had never needed one. My mother had them, and my brother had them, and I had been 22 years old in a funeral home hallway, and nobody had handed me anything. I ordered one that afternoon. You fill out a request form. Name of decedent, date of death, place of death, and then there is a box on the form for your relationship to the person who died, because they will not sell a certified copy to just anybody. I want to tell you about that box. I had sat in a garage with count slips from 2010 and been fine. I had read my father's handwriting in a church parking lot in the dark and been fine. I sat in a plastic chair at a counter with a pen on a chain, and I wrote the word daughter in a box on a state form, and something came up out of the floor of me, and I had to put the pen down and sit there with my hand over my mouth for about a minute while a woman behind the glass looked at her computer very politely. Daughter. Because that is what my father called me on that policy in 1994, on a form at a union hall, and it had been sitting in a file in Cincinnati ever since, and it was the only place in the world where somebody had put my name down and it had stayed put. Before I left her office that morning, I asked Merritt about the photocopy. She read it again, the 4 sentences and the letterhead and the ballpoint in the corner. She said, where did you get this? I said, my brother's wife brought it to my house in an envelope that had already been opened. Merritt Sandage set it down on the desk and looked at it for a while. She said, Whitney, I want you to hear what this is. She said, in June of 2010, this company wrote to your mother's address asking about the status of the named beneficiary on a policy with an unclaimed benefit. And somebody wrote in the corner of it that it should go to your brother's office. She said, that is 16 years ago. She said, whatever else happens, your brother has known there was a policy since before you were 24 years old. I submitted the locator request on a Tuesday afternoon in the first week of August. Then nothing happened for 6 weeks. 6 weeks is a long time when a thing is out there being decided by strangers. Life did not stop for it. That is the part nobody puts in these stories, and it is most of what actually happens. The belt on the number 2 saw went down twice in August, and both times it went down at 4 in the morning, which is the worst hour there is. And both times I stood there with the maintenance guys and a flashlight while the whole line backed up behind us. The water pump on the escape started weeping in the middle of August. Ray Dunville looked at it in the lot after shift with a flashlight in his teeth and said he could do it Saturday if I bought the part. And he did it Saturday, and it took 4 hours, and he would not take money. He took a case of pop and a pan of brownies and acted like he had made out. My brother called 3 times. The first 2 calls were the old Grady, checking in, talking about a listing, asking if I had heard that so-and-so's boy had bought the old hardware building. He did not mention April or June or anything else, and neither did I. And both calls ended with "love you." And both times he meant it. The third call was different, and the third call came the last week of August, and it started with him saying, "Hey, can we talk about Mom?" He said she was not doing good. He said she had gotten quiet since the summer and was not eating right and had lost weight, and that Roberta had said the same thing. Then he said, "I am not going to tell you what to do." And then he told me what to do. He said, "Whatever else is going on, it is time to let the family stuff be over." He said, "She is 80. He said, "We are going to be standing in a funeral home before long, and whatever you are still working on out there is going to look real small." And then he said, and I am going to say this one time, "Whit, what you did at that church is eating her alive. What you did at that church." I said, "Grady, I have to be at work." He said, "All right. Think about it." 9 days later, she fell in the bathroom. She got up at 4 in the morning and she did not use the cane and her hip went out from under her on the tile. She could not get up and she could not reach the button. So she lay on that floor from about 4:15 until Roberta let herself in at 8. Nothing was broken. They kept her overnight in Owensboro for observation because of her blood pressure and because of her age. I drove over as soon as Grady texted. I got there at 6 in the evening, and I sat in the hallway outside her room for 4 hours and I did not go in. I want that on the record with everything else. I have told you what my aunt did and what my brother did and what my mother did, and I am going to tell you what I did too. I sat in a vinyl chair by the ice machine on the 4th floor with my father's photograph of the 2 of us on the back steps in my shirt pocket. And I could hear my brother's voice through the door telling her about the tract at Philpott, and I could hear her laugh at something, that same 3-sound laugh, and I did not go in. At 10 o'clock, the nurse came and asked me if I was waiting on somebody. I said, "No, ma'am," and I got up and drove home. That night, I typed out a text to Merritt Sandage that said, "I want to withdraw the request. I have decided not to do this." I looked at it for a long time. Then I held down the delete key until it was gone, and I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher, which is apparently what I do. 2 Saturdays later, Zetta made me come out to Biddle Road, and when I got there, Ray's truck was in the drive and Pris's little car was behind it. She had done that on purpose. She had called Pris at the plant, an 83-year-old woman who does not drive, calling a cooperative switchboard to get a shift lead on the phone. There was ham and cornbread and green beans she had put up herself and a coconut pie. And afterward, Ray taught Pris to play rook, and Pris cheated immediately and badly, and Zetta caught her and would not let it go for the rest of the night. Nobody said one word about my mother, or my brother, or the parish, or the letter. At some point, I fell asleep in the recliner in that front room with the television going and a cat on the arm of the chair, and I slept for 2 hours, and not one of the 3 of them woke me up. When I did wake up, Pris was washing dishes and Ray was drying and Zetta was sitting at the table with her hands folded, watching them do it in her kitchen, perfectly content. I have thought about that room a great deal since. There was not one drop of blood in it that had anything to do with me. The letter came on the 22nd of September. It was in a windowed envelope in with a power bill and a coupon flyer, and the return address said Cincinnati, Ohio. and I stood at my mailbox on Triplet Street at 4 in the afternoon and opened it right there on the sidewalk. It was one page, and the top half of it was my father. Insured, Vernon L. Bickett, date of birth, date of death, the 14th of March, 2009, policy number, 11 digits, issued the 8th of November, 1994, status of policy, paid up, in force, status of benefit, unclaimed, beneficiary of record, Whitney Lee Bickett, daughter, face amount, $86,000. And then a second line. Because on an unclaimed death benefit, the company has to add interest from the date of death, and 17 years is 17 years. Total payable, subject to verification, $102,416. I stood on the sidewalk in front of my mailbox with a power bill in my other hand. I did not scream, and I did not sit down in the grass, and I did not call anybody. I read it 4 times. And then I folded it, and then I walked up the steps and into my own half of that duplex and set it on the counter and stood there. $102,000. The house behind me was 1,100 square feet with somebody else's name on the deed. I took a picture of the letter and sent it to Merritt Sandage at 4:18 in the afternoon, and she called me at 4:35, and the first thing she said was, "All right. Now do not do anything for 24 hours. I was in her office on Thursday morning. She had the letter, the death certificate, my father's letter from the cedar chest, and the photocopy Tammy had brought me laid out in a row on the desk. She said, "Here is where you are." She said, "The company is not fighting you. Nobody is contesting anything. You are the named beneficiary and the policy is in force and the money is yours." Then she said, "But there is a knot in it, and it is not a legal knot. It is a file knot." She said, "This benefit has been sitting unclaimed for 17 years. When a claim comes in that late, the company runs it through a different desk. They want to know why. That is not suspicion. That is just how it works." And she said, "In the file at that company, there is a letter from June of 2010 to your mother's address, asking about the status of the named beneficiary, and there is no record of anybody ever answering it." She said, "So they are going to ask 2 things. They are going to ask you to explain the delay in a sworn statement, and they are going to want confirmation that there is no dispute inside the family about who this belongs to." I said, "There is no dispute. My name is on the policy." She said, "I know that." "And you are right. Oh, but a company that pays out $100,000 on a claim that is 17 years late is going to make sure that 6 months from now, some other family member does not turn up with a lawyer." Then she said the thing that turned the whole last month of my life. She said, "So we can do this 2 ways?" She said, "We can go back and forth with them by mail for 8 or 10 months, and I will bill you for every letter, and it will probably be fine. Or," she said, "we do it once, properly, on the record, in this office, with everybody who ever touched that 2010 letter sitting in the room, and I take their statements, and it goes in with the claim, and it is done." I said, "Everybody." She said, "Your mother, because it came to her address. Your brother, because somebody wrote his office on the corner of it." She said, "They do not have to come. I cannot make them. But if they will not, then the claim sits." Here is the part I need you to understand, because people have told this story back to me wrong about 6 different ways since. I did not set up that meeting. I did not choose the room, and I did not choose who was in it. And I did not sit up nights planning how to get my mother and my brother in the same place with a court reporter and spring something on them. A company in Cincinnati, Ohio, that has never heard of my family, needed a hole in a file filled in. That is all. 17 years of silence. And then one afternoon, a claims department needed to know why. And it turned out the only way for anybody to ever answer that question was for 4 people to sit down at a table and have somebody write it down. Merritt sent the letters out the next Monday. Grady called me 2 days later. Not angry. Careful. Which is worse from him. He said, "So what is this?" I said, "Dad had a policy. My name is on it. The company needs to know why nobody claimed it for 17 years. There was a pause that was about 2 seconds too long. Then he said, "Well, I do not know anything about that." I said, "Okay." He said, I will be there. My aunt was not invited. Merritt had not written to her and had no reason to. She came anyway, in the car with Grady and my mother, because that is how that family travels, and because Dovie Hayden has never in her life let her sister walk into a room she was not in. The night before, I sat at my kitchen table with the 17th spiral notebook Zetta had given me, and I wrote out 3 sentences I wanted to say. I read them back at about midnight. Then I tore that page out and threw away 2 of them. Thursday, the 1st of October, 9 in the morning, in a converted house on Frederica Street with a porch on the front of it. The conference room in that converted house used to be somebody's dining room. There is still a chandelier in it. The table is particle board with a wood grain sticker on it, and there are 6 chairs that do not match. Merritt sat at the head with her legal pad. Her assistant, a young woman named Corliss, sat at the corner with a laptop. In the middle of the table, there was a small black recorder with a red light on it. My mother sat across from me with her cane hooked on the chair, Grady beside her, my aunt beside him, at the far end, with her purse in her lap and her glasses on the chain. Through the window, you could see the parking lot of the insurance office next door, and a man on a riding mower going back and forth across the strip of grass along the fence. He was out there the entire time. Merritt turned on the recorder and read the date and the names, and said what it was for in the flattest voice I have ever heard a person use on purpose. She said, "This is a statement in connection with a claim under a policy issued by Ohio Valley Mutual Life on the life of Vernon L. Bickett. Nobody here is under subpoena. Anybody can leave at any time. Nobody left." She started with Grady, and she started easy. She said, "Mr. Bickett, prior to this year, had you ever had contact with Ohio Valley Mutual Life?" He said, "No." She slid the photocopy across the table. He looked at it for maybe 4 seconds. He said, I have never talked to them." She said, "Is that your office address written in the corner?" He said, "That is not my handwriting." She said, "That is not what I asked you." And Grady, who has closed I do not know how many deals in this county, who can talk to anybody, sat in a chair in a room with a chandelier in it and said, "I picked up Mom's mail for her. That is all. I picked up her mail and there was a stack of it and I did not read every piece of it." Merritt let that sit for a second and then she wrote something down and she moved on and she never came back to it, and that was worse for him than if she had. Then she turned to my mother. She said, "Mrs. Bickett, when did you first learn that your husband had this policy?" Grady said, "Mom does not really," Merritt said, "Mr. Bickett." That is all she said. 2 words, and not loud. He stopped. And then there was a silence that I have measured since against every silence I have ever been in, and it was about 4 seconds long. And the only sound in that room was a riding mower going away from us across a strip of grass. My mother said, "April." Merritt said, "April of what year?" My mother said, 2009, 4 weeks after he passed. She said it looking at the table. She said, "It was in his toolbox out in the garage, the metal one." The policy papers were in a bank envelope, and the letter was down under the tray with his taps and dies. Merritt wrote for a moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Bickett, the envelope was addressed to your daughter, to be given to her on her 25th birthday. That would have been March of 2012. Why was it not given to her?" And my mother said, "Because she would have gone." Nobody said anything. Merritt said, "I am sorry. Could you say that again for the record?" And my mother lifted her head. She said, "If Whitney Lee had had that money at 25 years old, she would have been gone by that summer. She would have been out of this county and she would not have come back, and everybody in this room knows it." She said her daddy always did know how to hand her a door. She said, "And Grady was never going to stay. He has never stayed anywhere in his life. He would have come by on Sundays and told me about his week." Then she said, "Somebody had to be here." She looked at the recorder for a second like she had just remembered it was on, and then she went ahead anyway. She said, "I did not spend a dime of it. It was never mine, and I never touched it, and I never wanted it." She said, "I just did not give it to her." 17 years, and a stroke, and a hip, and a bathroom floor at 4 in the morning, and 11 years of the first of the month, and every Sunday I ever drove out there with filters in a plastic bag, all of it bought with an envelope in a cedar chest. She did not steal from me. That is the thing I cannot get around, and I have quit trying. She did not want the money. She did not spend it or hide it or lose it. She had one child she could keep, and she kept her. And the way she kept her was by not handing her the piece of paper her father left. My aunt said, "Rosemary was a widow with 2 grown kids and no help from anybody. And I do not think one person at this table has any business." Nobody answered her. Merritt did not look up. Corliss kept typing. The mower came back the other way. That is the last thing my aunt said in that room, and it is the last thing Dovie Hayden has said in my presence to this day. I did not cry. I sat there and looked at the little black recorder with the red light on it, and the thing I was thinking was not about my mother at all. What I was thinking was that a woman in an office in Cincinnati, Ohio, who will never meet any of us, is going to put that in a file, and it is going to stay there. Somebody wrote it down. Merritt turned a page on her pad and said, "Miss Bickett, is there anything you would like to add to the record?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. One thing," I said. "I want the record to show that my father put my name on that form in 1994 and wrote down why in 2009, and that this morning is the first time anybody in my family has said any of it out loud." Merritt wrote it down. Then she said, "That concludes the statement," and reached over and pressed the button, and the red light went off. It took 9 minutes. I had been getting ready for it for 6 weeks. The parking lot behind that house is gravel. Of course, everything in my life happens on gravel. Grady came out the side door after me and got to my car before I had it open. He said, "Hey," he said, "Look, that was rough in there. That was rough for everybody, and I am not going to pretend I liked it." Then he said, "But we ought to talk about this the right way." I said, "Talk about what?" And my brother said, "Well, that is $100,000. He said, "And I am not saying it is not yours. Legally. I understand it is yours legally. But that came out of what Dad and Mom built, and there were 2 of us. And if we are going to be fair about this, we ought to sit down and look at the whole picture. Mom's house, her care going forward, all of it." He said, "I would just hate for something like this to be the thing that ends a family." I looked at him standing there in the gravel in a good shirt. 14 minutes earlier, he had heard his mother say, on a recording, that she had kept an envelope out of her daughter's hands for 14 years, so her daughter would not leave town. He had heard it. He was 4 feet from her when she said it. And when he walked out into the daylight, the first thing his mind reached for was a number and how it ought to be divided. I said, "Grady, did you hear what she said in there?" He said, "Yeah. And Mom is 80 years old and she is not always—" I said, "That is not what I asked." He said, "Whit." He said it the way he has said it my whole life. The way you say a child's name when the child is about to be difficult. I said, "My father left me a letter, and he said in it that this family had 2 kinds of children in it. You were in the room this morning and you still cannot hear it." He said, "That is not fair." And I said, "No, it is not." Then I got in my car. My aunt came out with my mother a minute later. She went straight to Grady's truck with her purse under her arm, and she did not look over at me one time, and I do not believe she will again, and I have made my peace with that. Tammy was standing by her own car on the end of the row. She had driven separately. I do not know why, and I have never asked. She said, "I want to tell you why, since nobody is going to ask me in there." She said she found that letter in about 2013, in a banker's box in their basement, in with old files, and she asked Grady about it, and he said it was nothing, and she believed him, because you do. She said, and I put it back. Then she said, in April, at that party, he stood up in front of everybody and called you what he called you, and your mother laughed. And I was standing at that sink in the kitchen with my hands in the water. She said, and I have washed a lot of dishes in that family. She did not cry. She got in her car and backed out and left. And Tammy and I have talked about 4 times since and never once about that. My mother came out last. She came down the ramp on the side of that porch with the cane, 1 step at a time, the way she does now. And she came across the gravel to my window, and I rolled it down because I was not going to be the kind of person who does not roll the window down. She stood there. She did not say she was sorry. She has not said it. I do not believe she is going to. What she said was, "Have you got something to eat tonight?" And I want to tell you what happened in me when she said that, because it is not what I expected and it is not clean. That is her. That is the whole woman. That is every casserole she ever carried to a funeral home and every pot of water she ever hauled down a hallway in 1994. She does not have the other words. She was not given them, and she never went looking for them. "Have you got something to eat tonight?" is the only apology that exists in her language. And she was offering it, and it was not enough, and she meant it. I said, "Yes, ma'am." Then I said the thing I had written down and not thrown away. I said, "Mom, I am going to come see you the 2nd Saturday of every month, and I am going to stay about 40 minutes. I said, I am not going to take phone calls about money. Not yours, not Grady's, not anybody's," I said. "And I am not sending anything to that account again. Not $1 more. If you need something, you will have to ask me for the thing itself, and I will decide." She stood there in the gravel, and she looked at me for a second, and she said, "All right. That is all. All right." Then she went and got in the truck. I drove home the long way, out through Philpott and back down the highway. And about a mile before the turn, I realized what I was doing. For 11 years, any time I had been out that direction, I had swung by Hayden Bridge Road, slowed down, looked at the porch light, made sure. I went on past the turn. The money came on the 6th of November. It was a check in a windowed envelope, and it took 2 business days to clear, and there was no ceremony about it at all. $102,416. Merritt told me one thing before I touched it. The $86,000 is the death benefit, and it is not taxable income. The $16,416 is interest, and interest is income, and the government is going to want its part of that next April. So put some of it in a separate account and do not look at it. I did that first. Then I paid off a credit card I had been carrying since 2017, $9,400, at a rate I am embarrassed to say out loud, that I had been making the minimum on for so long that I had stopped seeing it as debt and started seeing it as a bill. Then I bought 4 tires, not the cheap ones. And then I called my landlord. Denny has owned that duplex since 2004, and his knees are bad, and he has been saying he would unload it for as long as I have lived there. He said $124,000. We settled at $122 over the phone in about 9 minutes. I put $60,000 down and financed the rest through the bank on Frederica, and I closed on it the 18th of December. I own both halves, mine, and the one on the other side where the man watches game shows with the volume all the way up. He is my tenant now. I have not raised his rent, and I am not going to. That is what I did with it. That is all of it. There was no trip, and there was no new car, and I did not quit my job. I still clock in at 10:40 at night, but nobody can put me out of that house. Not Denny, not Denny's kids when he goes, not anybody. I am 39 years old, and that is the first time in my life that has been true. My brother signed a resignation of agent in the middle of November after one letter from Merritt Sandage. That is all it took. One letter. There was no lawsuit, no police, and nobody was charged with anything. And I never asked for any of that. My mother went into the place on Carter Road the week before Christmas. She fought it for about 10 days, and then she stopped fighting it. And the truth is she is doing better there than she was doing alone in that house at 4 a.m. The house sold in March. The money from it pays for Carter Road. There is a bill pay service out of Louisville that handles it now, for $45 a month, and they send a statement to 3 people, and one of the 3 is me. I do not pay for anything anymore. The bulletin correction from July is in a banker's box in a garage on Biddle Road with 2026 written on the end of it in Sharpie. Zetta put it there herself. She said, "Well, that goes in the file," and it did. My father's letter is in the blue folder, not a safe deposit box, not a frame. The same $29 drugstore folder with the metal clasp that I set down next to a sheet cake in April, with the 11 tabs still in it and the label maker labels going yellow. I put it in there because that folder is the only object I own that has both halves of my life in it. The 11 years I paid, and the reason I never had to. On Thanksgiving, I went to Carter Road at 9 a.m. and stayed 40 minutes. Which is what I said I would do. We watched a cooking show. A man made a pie with a lattice top, and my mother said that was too much work for a pie. And I said it was. And she laughed her 3 sounds. Nothing was said about April or June or October. Nothing is ever going to be said about them. I have quit waiting for it, and quitting was harder than any of the rest of it. I kissed the top of her head at 9:40 and I left. Then I drove out to Biddle Road. Ray got there before me and had the turkey out of the oven, and it was too big, the way it is every year because Zetta buys for 11 people out of habit. Pris brought a green bean casserole that she did not make and did not pretend she made. Tammy came at noon by herself, and nobody asked her a single question about it, and she stayed until 9. There were 4 of us and a card table with a folding chair that has 1 short leg, and we ate until 2 in the afternoon, and then Ray and Pris did the dishes, and Zetta sat at the table with her hands folded and watched them do it in her kitchen. Not 1 drop of blood at that table had anything to do with me. Here is what I know, and it is not a lesson. It is just what happened. A family can run for 30 years on a story that is not true. Nobody has to be evil for that. My brother is not evil, and my mother is not evil, and even my aunt is not what you would call evil. She is a woman who got scared in 2008 and found out that a name is a cheap thing to spend. The story does not correct itself. It never once corrects itself. It sits there and every new fact gets sorted into it. And the person it is about gets quieter and quieter, and after a while she is not even arguing anymore. She is just carrying it. The only thing that ever moved it 1 inch was paper, a count slip from a garage, a receipt from a clinic in another state, 11 years of transfers in a cheap blue folder, 2 pages of legal pad from a man who has been dead 17 years and finally got heard. I am not going to sit here and tell anybody to walk away from their family. I did not walk away from mine. She is on Carter Road, and I will be there the 2nd Saturday of every month for as long as she is. But I will say this one thing, and then I will leave you alone with it. Do not let other people be the ones who keep the record of your own life. So think about your own house for a second. When your family tells the story of who everybody is, who gets to be the one who carries, and who gets to be the one who is carried and who decided that? And if somebody asked you tomorrow to prove your side of it, what have you actually got? I have got a cheap blue folder in a $6 file cabinet, in a hallway, in a house on Triplet Street with my name on the deed. That is enough. It turned out to be enough.